I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for May 26th. Welcome to Tourism Week across the province. Councillors, you have today's you have today's agenda for approval. Are there any additions, deletions, other changes to be made to the agenda? If not, might I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Chernow, thank you. All in favor? I'm sorry, Councillor McGrath, did you want to comment on the agenda first, or were you just early with the vote? Looks like we have approval. Thank you. The minutes of the regular meeting of May 19th, 2020 have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing none, might I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes as presented? Councillor Keller-Rempe, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? All right, I'll go back. Both Councillor Butler and Councillor Demota, could you signify in favor or opposed? Let me know. Your hands were both very late coming up. In favor, thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Demota in favor, thank you. All right, so those minutes are approved.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Presentations.
It seems like we're experiencing some sort of feedback delay, and I think even on my side with your motions, it's like there's about a 3-second delay.
Thank you. I will be sensitive to that.
You know what?
Give lots of time for indication of votes. Mr. Burchill.
I think it's our pushing
Yes,
out
Mr.
to
Burchill?
YouTube is causing the issue. Did you hear me that time?
Yes. I heard you potentially identify the problem. I didn't hear a solution.
The only thing I could think of is if we tell people on the YouTube to log off and come on to Zoom, because otherwise I don't know that this is going to change. It seems to be a push out to YouTube is causing some problems with the internet.
Thank you, Mr. Furcho. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, I would like to take that suggestion if there are viewers on YouTube at the moment. If it's the will of council, I would recommend we're test driving this process live, and it's just, to me, it's not working, and I don't think it's worthwhile for the process. So I would recommend going that route and just getting everybody onto Zoom.
Could I get an indication from councillors whether that is? Councillor Wilson, you're in favor of Councillor Demota's suggestion. Councillor McGrath, Councillor Butler, Councillor Chernow, and Councillor Keller-Rempe. Fine. So, Mr. Furcho, if you can hear, see whether you can fix this. I'll give us just a few minutes, allow people to convert from a YouTube feed to a Zoom feed.
All right, thank you. I will do that. So anybody that's on YouTube, on the Jasper website are instructions on how to log into Zoom, and come across, we'll just have a little delay, and then I'll kill the YouTube link for now until we get a higher speed system here. I don't know. It's causing a lot of delay.
Mr. Furcho, I'm going to wait for you to give an indication that you've made that switch, and then I'll recommence the meeting.
Okay, it's been done. How does it feel now? Is it more stable on this end? I think it's just the internet today. I don't know. Maybe another day will be better.
All right, does it appear now to councillors that you're hearing more or less live? And I wait for a few seconds delay, but okay, fair enough. All right. A lesson perhaps in Newtonian physics: for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That reaction was not what we wanted, but it's what we got. All right, I will begin again then on agenda item 4, presentations. We have a standing presentation from the ECC, an update from Mr. Van Tighem. Mr. Van Tighem, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Your Worship and Council and guests on the Zoom platform. As the Director of Emergency Management for the Municipality of Jasper, my responsibility is to lead the municipal response through the COVID-19 incident. Every municipality in Alberta is required to maintain emergency plans, to appoint a Director of Emergency Management, and to follow the direction of the Alberta Emergency Management Agency through the various acts and regulations. During a community emergency, municipal staff assemble under the Incident Command System structure at the Emergency Coordination Center, the ECC. Our community partners at Parks Canada, as well as Alberta Health and the province, have also activated their respective emergency plans and their respective emergency operations centers. All which in this case, because of the COVID-19 situation, are being carried out in a virtual fashion, and there are no face-to-face meetings. The Provincial Operations Center in Edmonton de-escalated to an operational level 3 on May 22nd. And on May 18th, the municipality of Jasper's ECC scaled down to a level 3, which meant we went from a 4-meeting cycle to a 2-meeting cycle, and we deactivated the emergency social services function and back into community family services. Presently in Alberta, there are 19 confirmed new cases of COVID-19 over the last 24 hours, which brings our total in the province to 6,879 cases. There are 762 total active cases in the province. There are 45 people in the hospital, which include 5 people in intensive care units. An additional 3 people have died in the last 24 hours, bringing that total to 138 people. There are a total of 5,979 confirmed recovered cases, and there have been 3,010 COVID-19 tests completed in the last 24 hours, which brings the total number of tests in Alberta to 239,799. In the agenda package, there was included a letter from 5 Jasper doctors in regards to public masking for COVID. This initiative was spearheaded by Dr. Declan Unsworth. And as I mentioned, the letter and the supporting documentation are in the package, and I'm assuming that most people have had a chance to look at it. And the Alberta Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Henshaw, now recommends that all Albertans wear a mask if they are within 2 meters distance of another. Masking is not seen as normal in our society. Masks are seen as a sign of sickness, but really they should be seen as a sign of politeness and a sign of respect. If masks were seen regularly in businesses, employees would be accustomed to wearing masks, and members of the public may be more comfortable with that idea. In addition, once the park reopens, many employees and patrons may feel safer in restaurants, grocery stores, or restaurants with staff who are wearing masks. Dr. Unsworth provided the following summary, and I'm not reading the full letter, but the conclusion was, to avoid a secondary shutdown of businesses, we need to prevent a COVID-19 outbreak. Mask wearing has been recommended by the provincial government. It's a simple and effective solution and will likely benefit local businesses. Therefore, it would be appreciated if you would consider strongly encouraging or mandating masking at the municipal level and encouraging visitors and the local community to use masks when they cannot maintain a 2-meter distance from each other. Yours faithfully, Dr. Unsworth, Wilson, Lacour-Serre, and Swanepoel. And just further to that, the municipality of Jasper, ECC, does support the use of masking by individuals unable to maintain safe social distancing. The municipality has developed safe work practices to direct all staff to wear a mask when they cannot maintain the 2-meter safe distance from one another. All municipal staff are mandated to follow this and other Alberta Health Services COVID-19 health directives. This is not something that we can enforce as a municipality, but it is certainly an initiative that we can promote locally. And in our last ECC meeting, we discussed ways in which we could promote this initiative. And Your Worship, if I may, if at this time, I'm not sure if it's appropriate, but if any councillors had any questions, and I'm assuming that Dr. Unsworth is on the call, but I don't imagine he'd be able to speak. But if there were some specifics that could be relayed to him through me, I could definitely deal with that.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tighem. As I read the agenda, I guess it's not a separate presentation, it's part of your presentation, but if council was interested in hearing from Dr. Unsworth and he's available, I would just turn that to a question of council consent. But in the meantime, if there are questions of councillors for Mr. Van Tighem, now is the time. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Journeau, and Councillor Demota, in that order.
Mr. Van Tighem, my question is regarding masking and restaurants. So, what's the protocol, or what's the suggestion? While you're drinking or eating, sitting at a restaurant, if it's mandated to be wearing masks, you can't maintain social distance. What's the suggestion that happens in that situation?
Well, again, as always, it falls back to Alberta Health Services directives. The main intent, I think, of the masking in businesses and restaurants in particular, that the staff would be wearing the masks. The customers, not so much. The way that the relaunch of the restaurant opening is set up or set forth by Alberta Health is that there is distancing already incorporated into the layout. The 50% of their occupant load and the table spacing and whatnot. What that doesn't address is people at an individual table, and the expectation there from Alberta Health health. At least my understanding is that the people at the table themselves would be considered a family group. So in most situations, that's a group of friends or family members or people that have close ties normally. The expectation is not to have strangers from, that don't know each other sitting at the same table. So the distancing would be from them. And that I really don't expect the expectation to be that the customers are wearing the mask, because as you mentioned, it'd be difficult to eat your meal or drink your beverage if you had a mask on. And it goes back again to the very basic. If you're experiencing symptoms, et cetera, then you take all these precautions. But one concern with COVID-19 is that someone can actually have the virus and not know it for a number of days. So that's particularly important for the staff in the restaurants where they're serving multiple people throughout the day and the week, is that they maintain the masking to keep the customer safe and also to keep the other staff safe. I don't know if I totally answered your question, Councillor Wilson, but
well, no, that's fine. Thank you. I just would like to comment that I really like hearing from our local healthcare professionals and what their suggestions may be to keep our communities safe and open for the so thank you, doctors.
Councillor Journeau.
More of a comment, inquiry. I'm of the opinion that every retail outlet should have a hand sanitizing station on entry as you come in. So that way, once the people enter the store, their hands are clean, whatever they touch is not going to be contaminated. I was referred to the Alberta Health site there, and it's somewhat unclear. It's not, I don't find it clear enough, and I think that most retailers don't understand. I think that that's something that your group could do here, Mr. Van Tighem, is to go around to the businesses and either encourage them or in some cases even make it mandatory. I go to the grocery stores and they go through great lengths to clean the basket as I go out. It seems to me I should be cleaning my hands before I go in so that whatever I touch is not contaminated. Any thoughts, comments? I think we could step up there on controlling the spread that way.
thank you, Councillor Journeau. And I agree with you 100%. And a number of outlets have stepped up and provided what you spoke of, but some haven't. And I will take your suggestion, because like I said, I agree with it 100%, and we will act on that. I'm making notes as we speak here. So thank you very much, Councillor Journeau.
Councillor DeVota.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Van Tighem, for another helpful update. I would like to encourage anybody that's watching right now to scroll into our agenda and look at the recommendations from our doctors and statistical data, as well as the proper wearing of putting on and the use of masks. I think some of that information is very helpful. Having said that, maybe not really directed towards ECC, but for consideration at the Recovery Task Force group, and considering what our overall message is. And I wasn't going to address this until Mr. Journeau, Councillor Journeau made the point that I think that if we had a consistency throughout the community with all our businesses, particularly the ones that where people might be a little bit up more close within the 2-meter distancing, to have similar protocols so people know what they're going to be receiving when they're going into certain establishments. And I think that maybe some messaging, I'm not sure what is coming out of some recommendations out of the task force so far, but even before we open, Parks Canada opens up on June 1st, like, what is our message? You know, if people are coming to hotels, are they going to be expected to put sheets on their beds? Like, what's the overall message that we're getting here? Like, how are we going to be receiving people as a collective, and what are the processes that everybody understands, so that everybody knows what's going on when we start receiving people in the community? Those are just some thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. I will speak briefly to that towards the end of my report, but I do appreciate your comments, and also, again, I agree with you on your comments. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Tighem, and thank you very much to the physicians in Jasper. I don't think it's very often that physicians from Jasper would be bringing decisions forward to council. So I believe it's the people that these physicians are asking us to consider this measure. We should certainly give it the attention it deserves for the people who work so hard to keep us safe every single day. So thank you very much. And I think that I'm fully behind wearing masks where social distancing is not possible.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath.
Mr. Van Tighem, I would just like to confirm current status in terms of the request by the local doctors, and as has been expressed by other councillors, I appreciate that they have taken the time to inform us and get this letter onto our agenda. They have asked or suggested that it would be appreciated if you would consider strongly encouraging or mandating masking at the municipal level. I think that I am to interpret that within the municipal workforce, say the municipal level. And I understood you to say that not only have we encouraged it, in fact, for municipal employees, we have already mandated that. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have established a safe work practice that speaks to masking and social distancing.
Okay. So that part, we are already in agreement. We have already taken positions publicly on several occasions that our role is to be supportive of public health measures and that we would follow and encourage others to follow Alberta Health Services directives and recommendations, and we can continue to do that. Is there any particular suggestion from either the ECC or the local doctors about how we might broaden that level of encouragement? Is it simply getting a message out on our COVID-19 webpage, repeated comments publicly, or do the doctors have some other thought in mind that you're aware of to help us get that message out? Because surely the community is at risk of a second shutdown if we don't take care, and nobody wants to go through that. So I'm just looking for ways that we might act on the request of the doctors.
Thank you, Your Worship. My understanding with speaking with Dr. Declan Unsworth was that this was more to get approval or support from the municipality at that level and encourage or ask us to support and to, I guess, lack of a better term, market this initiative. And there was a suggestion of, I don't think he used the word enforcement, but there was a suggestion of that type of level of enforcement of masking, which I made it, and I will make it quite clear that that's something that we cannot do. However, at the ECC meeting yesterday, we were in full agreement to support this initiative. And the way we will be moving forward on this is we will include this masking initiative in all our messaging, which is sort of multifaceted. We have a number of different tools we use for messaging, as well as also monitoring our own people, our own staff, making sure that they're following the safe work practices that are in place, and encouraging just through our interactions with the business community, et cetera, encouraging people to take on this very important masking protocols and start utilizing it, and doing it properly too is another key point, because as was indicated in the report, there's a lot of ways to contaminate or cross-contaminate or wear a mask improperly that's basically not going to benefit anybody. So that's another part of this, is making sure that masking is also carried out in the proper manner.
Thank you, Chief Van Tighem.
May I? Mr. Van
Yes.
Tegan, the supplies of masks, is it possible like lists can be posted on the website where people buy them? Because just through my own work, I know that for us ordering masks for our buses, we have to wait and supply plentiful. So possible like for where people can buy the masks, they're available. I know a lot of people are making home, but I know for visitors coming in and that, like where they can get masks. I think that's very important to get out there.
Thank you, Councillor Keller MP. Yes, that is a very good point. Initially, and I'm going to say initially up to a couple of weeks ago, the supply of masks was very limited. And as anybody that tried to procure them found out that sometimes that was difficult. That we've rounded a corner on that. There is more available now. But I will take, and I'm like I mentioned earlier, I'm taking notes. So I will take that in consideration. I've also made a note that we need to include that with our communications with the not just the tourists, the residents, but also the business community. And then you brought up a very good point, is the fact that we need to know locally where they are available. And that's something that we'll look into also.
Thank you all. Are there other questions for Chief Van Tighem? Having heard nothing but support for encouraging visitors and the local community to use masks when they 2 meter distance, I take it that council generally supports stepping up our opportunities and our messaging to make that encouragement broadly to the community and to our guests. Just a nod of heads. Everybody agrees that the doctors have convinced us that that is a step we should take. Perfect. Thank you all. And thanks again to the doctors for submitting that information, which again is on the agenda on the website for public viewing for anybody who wants to look at the particular presentation. Thank you then, Chief Van Tighem. Was there anything else that you didn't get to in your report?
Yes, Your Worship. If you will allow me to, I will continue.
Yes, please do.
The next topic on the agenda yesterday, well, has been for quite some time, was playgrounds, local playgrounds. So in stage 1 of the relaunch strategy, the province was lifting some restrictions on playgrounds. However, it is up to individual municipalities to make their own determination on safety, cleanliness, and monitoring, and in addition to ensuring playground inspections are conducted regularly. Throughout the province, there's a number of playgrounds open, as well as there's a number that still are not open for various reasons. The Emergency Coordination Center has reviewed the provincial directives. We have talked to some of our counterparts in the region, and we are working with municipal managers right now to determine the best course of action to ensure the safety of our children and families who utilize municipal play structures. However, at this time, municipal playgrounds are not open. We do anticipate that to change in the near future as the resources become available. The province has recently changed their messaging, and one of the councillors spoke earlier to, I think it was Councillor Demota, asking about messaging. The province has changed their messaging from, it used to be stay home. Now they're saying you can go out, but please do so safely. Physical distancing requirements of 2 meters remain in place through all stages of their provincial relaunch. Wearing a mask can help prevent us from passing an illness on to other people. Good hygiene practices are still required for businesses and individuals. Albertans are legally required to isolate for at least 10 days if they have symptoms such as a cough, fever, shortness of breath, runny nose, or sore throat. Continue to follow public health advice. Be thoughtful and intentional in your outings. Shop for what you need. Take appropriate precautions. Wash your hands. Practice physical distancing and stay home if you're sick. And continue to protect yourself and others. So the province in the last week has transitioned from the stay home message to you can go out but do it safely, which in some respects can be contradictory to Jasper because we are not in the province per se. We're in a national park that has a different timeline. So as alluded to in a few of my other reports, there are concerns locally with individual travelers coming to Jasper when we're not quite prepared to receive them at any great numbers. Again, we tread lightly in that respect, but we have been pushing our message very consistently through a number of means to get the message out that Jasper's not quite ready. June 1st is the date that Parks Canada has provided for opening some services. Just to confuse things even a little more, the province has also changed their messaging on non-essential travel. And it took us quite a while. We're trying to establish what non-essential meant, and we never did come up with a definite determination of what non-essential travel meant. But now the province is saying instead of discouraging all non-essential travel, non-essential travel outside the province is not recommended. That particular recommendation would be lifted in stage 3 of the relaunch. They're saying people can travel responsibly to summer homes, cabins, and cottages within Alberta. If you choose to travel, the government of Alberta is recommending that you pack your own food and stop for gas only if necessary. You take all necessary precautions to protect your health and the health of those around you, and check with the local municipality to find out if local restrictions differ from those where you live. So with these changing messages, the municipality of Jasper and the upcoming June 1st, less than I guess a week away now, looming in front of us, we are anticipating that we will have more visitors to our community. So the municipality of Jasper will be changing the message, the overall message, also the message on the signs on the outside of town, and also we will be adding more signage in the business area of the community, more particular to social distancing than to what services are available or whatnot. So in alignment with our partners at Parks Canada, we're still asking visitors to save their trip to Jasper until the National Park services resume. And as camping in national parks, including Jasper National Park, will be suspended until at least June 21st. So no campgrounds will be open until at least June 21st. Some trails, day use areas, green spaces, and recreational boating will be available starting June 1st. Until then, all suspension of visitor service and closure of facilities remain in place. So the municipality of Jasper is committed to a gradual, safe reopening of services. And we will work with our partners with Parks Canada to make this as smooth as possible. As a community, we have been through a lot during this COVID pandemic. The reality is the province is quickly transitioning and visitors have started coming back to Jasper and numbers will increase. As a tourist community, we rely on visitors to keep Jasper's local business community vibrant and resilient. As a community, we care and are concerned about our safety and the safety of our people. But now more than ever, we must maintain safe health practices. We cannot let our guards down now. Adjusting to today's new normal will take time for businesses, visitors, and residents. So please, I encourage everybody to be patient, to be kind, and as we work through this gradual safe reopening together, stay happy. Thank you very much, Your Worship and Council, and I'll field any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Chief Van Tighem. Questions from councillors? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tighem. I know there's a lot of anxious skateboarders as well in the community, and I'm wondering, on the same topic of playgrounds, are you considering the skate park in that decision making?
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Yes, definitely skate parks and public parks and the tennis court are the three municipal areas that we're looking at reopening.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Just to follow up on that question, maybe directed more toward Mr. Furcho. Do we have the money in our budget to open playgrounds under the regulations forth by government at this point, or were we going to have to source funds for that?
Your worship, through to Councillor Wilson, that is part of what we're discussing with the ECC, just looking at what it takes to meet those requirements and whether we have the resources or not yet, or if that'll be another conversation with council coming up. That's a good question.
Councillor McGrath.
I believe there has been many communities that have chosen to reopen their playground facilities and skateboard parks with messaging that reduces the liability to the organization, such as the municipal, where it's explaining to use at your own risk and that you're responsible for sanitization of your own belongings and your own body. And I think that there's probably a way around it with minimal costs to reopen and allow people to use our facilities at their own risk.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath, and I agree. I did speak to a few communities that are following that lead, and they're putting up signage indicating that basically use at your own risk type of a message. And yeah, we were considering that as well in our meeting.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I was sorry. Just wanted to. That I wouldn't support a way around it. You know, I would like to do it the proper way. I'd like to put the money and the manpower towards under the proper guidelines, and having staff support the parks opening and do excuse me, do the cleaning, do the monitoring. I don't think it should be a use it. That's a bit haywire to me.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Van Tighem? All right, seeing no hands aloft, I will say thank you, Mr. Van Tighem, for that report. Thanks again to the doctors. And we can move then to agenda item 5, business arising. Is there any business arising from the last minutes? Councillor Demota.
I'm not sure if other councillors or administration are receiving the same kind of feedback on our devices, but it's a lot of people are breaking up, and sometimes, particularly even when Councillor Wilson was speaking to the parks, it was broken up, and I think I gathered what he was saying, and I was in support of that, but it's we're having some difficult processes here.
Mr. Furcho.
I think it's the internet this morning, because when we trialed the YouTube thing, we didn't have a problem last time either. There's something, the internet's just overloaded this morning.
Well, we have 109 participants, so that does put a load on this system as well, but it's still appreciated. Again, I will return then. I acknowledge Councillor Demota, there may be some issues. We will have to proceed as best we can. If any councillor feels that they have missed a comment from another councillor or from administration, please just indicate to me, and we'll go over it until everybody is satisfied that they've heard what is being said by others. Is there then any business arising from the minutes of May 19th? If not, agenda item 6 is department reports. We have nothing scheduled. I assume if there had been something, Mr. Furcho would have told us. So, Councillor Journeau.
Can you hear the horns back here? There's a parade of cars going by here. Been about 20 cars. They all got honking their horns. It appears to be in support of early children because the back windows are open with the babies in the baby seats in the back. They've left now, but quite a distraction.
During one of our previous discussions, they circled my house as well. So the protest is coming to us. And so I'm happy to acknowledge that those people are out there making a point. I presume that they will go by the residents of every councillor to make their point. And if that is you, then Councillor Trudeau, there they are again. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, they did pass by my place earlier when Mr. Van Tighem was making his presentation, and I was very proud of switching the initiative from due to the weather, and I was quite impressed. And I have to say that I don't see it as a protest, but as an act of support for the daycare. So I thought that was pretty smart, and I'd like to see that.
All right. Moving on then to agenda item 7, information reports. And perhaps Mr. Furcho, you can explain the intent of these items in this fashion on the agenda.
Your worship, thanks. I was just sneezing. So, the information items are on the report. The information is contained in the report for council's consideration, with the exception of the Chamber of Commerce, the feedback from the business community that hasn't been completed yet. So that one won't be available, but the rest are available both on the agenda, and the people that have provided that information are available to speak should council have any questions. But otherwise, what you have is what's available to council on the agenda.
All right, thank you. Is it the will of council that council hear from, then I suppose, 3 potential information providers, adjourn those to other spots on the agenda, or deal with them in some other way? Councillor Demota.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, as I understand it, these information reports are there, but subject to direction from council. So they are people who have indicated, but they're not, they don't fall into either presentations in a proper sense, or correspondence for information, consideration, or action. They've come as information reports, and if council wants to receive those reports, that's fine, it can do so. And we can invite those people to address us if we choose. I'm just looking for some indication of the will of council on these matters. Councillor Kelleher MP, and then Councillor Butler.
I think it's great to hear them. I was wondering though if we can have the daycare presentation with the daycare decision. You know what I mean? I kind of line them up with the topics. It kind of makes more sense because then we're not flipping back and forth. But I think it's great.
There seemed to be some nodding of heads. So in the absence of objection, I think that is appropriate. So for the Wildflowers Parent Board contribution, if we can just hold that until agenda item 10, request for decisions with respect to daycare, that would be more appropriate there. Public spacing in public places, there was to be a further information report. And if Mr. Furcho can advance Brett Ireland, we could deal with agenda item 7.2, public spacing in public places. Good morning, Mr. Ireland.
Morning, Rich.
Please go ahead.
So yeah, thank you for having me again. I understand that Patty had completed a survey that I believe they've shared with you. Is that correct?
It is not yet complete.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I understand that was undergoing. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I think in hindsight, which is always 2020, I probably should have included a little bit more maybe specifics last time in regards to what the ask was, clarity around not asking to close Patricia and the opportunity maybe to have more pedestrian space with that partial laneway closure on Connaught. But I understand there's definitely some businesses and individuals that see it potentially presenting a challenge to their operations. And so, yeah, as I said before, the last thing I want to see is this hurt anybody's businesses any more than this COVID thing already has. So I guess, do you want me to speak to some more specifics, Richard, or do you want me to more take questions?
Unless there are changes at all in the proposal or things that were overlooked at the first presentation, I think council is aware of the presentation. I'm not sure that everybody listening has had the opportunity to be engaged last, 2 weeks ago when you made the presentation, but I don't see a need to repeat it. So I am comfortable if councillors have additional questions, that might be the most efficient approach. I see that Councillor Wilson has a question. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Brett Ireland. But my question, I'm very sensitive to the businesses that are opposed. And I guess my question is, how do you suggest support for their business? So for example, the coin laundry. Well, that's it's a pretty straightforward letter from the owners there, and it makes a huge amount of sense if I own that business. Their customers are coming with bundles full of laundry, and it doesn't make sense that they're going to bike that stuff down there. So are you suggesting that in front of their place, like they're most likely to be about 3 or 4 parking stalls, those parking stalls would still remain if they chose parking stalls for their business? I think where
sorry.
Go ahead, sir.
I guess where the genesis of the idea was really from the perspective that there's a need for more pedestrian space due to just the COVID scenario and the safety factor for guests and the community. So it started there, and certainly as I expressed, I feel there's an opportunity for businesses and a lot of both, if it works for retailers and whatnot, as we've heard from some of the groups in Banff and whatnot. But certainly there's lots, and like I said before, the last thing I want is to hurt anyone. The motorcycle group would express concerns and stuff. So one solution might be to just have it on an individual business by business basis, that if they have the opportunity, if they so choose to extend the sidewalk in front of their place and therefore be able to offer their products and services a little further out. That might be a solution. I think it's important, as a lot of people I think have already suggested, I think even some of the councillors, that there's a need for having some uniformity around the aesthetics and the look of that. I think is important. The other thing I can say from my perspective from the business is it's got the cost has to be borne in that case for that pedestrian boardwalk, whatever it is, from the business, not the town. I think that's pretty important and fair.
Yeah, thank you for that. And honestly, I am in huge support of it, although I definitely don't want it to be at the detriment of other businesses. And I really do feel that traffic on Patricia could be slowed quite drastically. If it is just out a single lane, well, I think that's almost better. I'd like to see a lot more pedestrian traffic out there. But again, we just want to make sure that we're thinking about all the businesses, not just restaurants that want to go out on the street. And I understand that some retailers want to get out on the street as well, but I think it definitely does benefit more restaurants than retail stores. But I'm very supportive of the idea, and I want to move forward pretty quickly with this to get you guys, enable you guys to plan and order material and build your patios, etc. But I just want to again as you said, we don't want to hinder the other businesses as well.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath, followed by Councillor Kelleher-MP.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ireland, for being here today. I think that there's a lot of division on the topic as you're feeling and we're feeling, and I think that's pretty expected with the nature of this and those councillors that have experience from prior councils. There's history of this being a very divided topic as well, but you know, as recommended by one of the commercial owners on Connaught in the email that's further down in our agenda today, there is an area that we can compromise, and there is an area, as Councillor Wilson suggested, where we can allow those businesses that need and want to expand to do so, to give them the biggest chance possible to once again thrive in their business and get their feet under them again, but also not negatively impacting their neighbors. So the pre-COVID Canmore approach is of interest to me, where the businesses that need expansion and more space can do so by building a boardwalk, and we as the municipality should come up with the motif of that boardwalk so it's unison and it's very consistent in our downtown core and looks beautiful. And definitely, as you mentioned, Mr. Ireland, that all of the expenses would be of the business. So we just need to be upfront and transparent with that, so that as businesses are planning their summer, they're factoring in this expense as possibly a one summer expense. But thank you very much for being here. And I think there is a way to get through this where we can make all community residents and business owners quite happy.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Kelleher-MP.
Councillor McGrath took my idea. I think we should go pre-COVID in Canmore. Also, I'm probably one of the councillors who have a lot of history with the shutdown of Patricia Street. I think I was the first one that actually went to all the businesses for the 20th anniversary of Jasper in January, and I still hear about it today. So our businesses are not in favor. I don't think it's the year to divide our businesses. I think we all have to work together in unity. The other thing I think for open up the spaces, it would be great if some of our buskers, maybe some of our artists can come out, and maybe we can allow Robson Park a summer for those individuals to showcase their art, showcase their busking skills, and maybe Parks Canada will allow some of this to happen also on the Parks Canada lawn in front of the information center. So I think that rather like now, you know, when you go down Patricia Street, we have buskers on Connaught, that we can take that out of the downtown core, put it in the parks, and I think that will absolutely open up. And it also, I find like a lot of people, because there's not a lot of things happening in the parks, kind of stay mainly in the downtown core. This way people can branch out over the summer. I think that would be also a great idea.
Councillor Demota.
Well, I wanted to thank Brett and his group again for taking the time and spending a lot of time on developing these proposals. And I think some really good thoughts gone behind all the types of scenarios that could work in our community. And I really hope that collectively, with the information that we have, that we can have something that's developed for our businesses and the community as a whole. I think there's some great opportunities here, and I can't wait to look at what the final product is. But I think that the amount of time and, you know, the quality of information that we have is really good. So thank you.
Other questions from councillors? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, and thanks, Mr. Ireland, as Councillor Rico said, for all of the work you have put into this. And I very much appreciate you getting the conversation started, and also noting your flexibility in recognizing some of the concerns that have been raised, and sort of adjusting your position. So that's much appreciated. Like most of what I'm hearing from other councillors, I'm in favor of the idea of allowing businesses to really consider how they would like to use the sidewalk and the parking spaces outside their premises, if they feel it's to their better advantage to use them for seating or display, and then redirect sidewalk traffic into the parking spaces, as has been done in lots of communities. I'm very familiar with how that's done in the city of Edmonton in certain areas, and I think it works really well. So I'm in favor of that. Not really in favor of closing traffic lanes down. I wanted to only mention one other thing to Councillor McGrath's point about, maybe legislating a sort of a theme or a consistent look and feel. I like the idea, but I'm concerned about over-engineering this and causing it to be more difficult, more time-consuming, and more expensive for proprietors to undertake. And I'd like to point out that we didn't do that when we first began allowing public or sidewalk seating, public use of or private use of the public sidewalks. And I think that most proprietors have been pretty responsible and come up with really nice looking solutions. And I would hate to see us now step in and sort of make them redo what they've already done, when honestly, I think while it might be a little bit inconsistent in appearance, it's been generally fairly successful. So just encourage us not to over-engineer a solution here so that we can get something done quickly and cost efficiently. So thanks again, Mr.
Councillor Demota.
Well, I really appreciate what Councillor Butler said, and and I'm just thinking back of like this whole process, and initially having it go to the recovery task force, and I'm a little disappointed that that a little more work wasn't done at that level, because I think with all the entities within our community that have the ability, the depth, the breadth, and the access to information, I had higher expectations of something coming out of that. Even with Parks Canada has like a community motif, and that I think could have been translated into something. And even though we have like we have to expedite a timeline here, something could have been worked on to say, like, if we're going to go in this process, this is the recommendation we can make. And I think we have a lot of decisions in our community that people are, I feel, being afraid to make decisions, and everything is getting defaulted onto council. And yes, we've been elected to lead, and we're going to have to take some leadership on this one. But I'd like to express my lack of disappointment in that whole recovery task force thing. They had every opportunity to bring in expertise in traffic and planning for Parks Canada, RCMP, and companies involved in transportation. I think collectively that group had the best spot in the best area to help make recommendations that's good for the entire community. And I could be speaking wrong, but I expected a little more, and I just wanted to express my disappointment there.
I just want to express my hesitation to unduly criticize people who have volunteered to serve the community in any sense. And it is a difficult question, and it does come back to council, and it is divisive, and it's difficult to suggest, I think, that any volunteer member of our community, of a task force or otherwise, should volunteer to accept accountability, which ultimately rests for council. So I hear what you're saying, that it might have worked out differently, but this is the way it worked out. And we are, I think, where we were going to get anyway, and that is a compromise that respects the fact that not all businesses are the same. They have different needs, and particularly in our community, which was not necessarily well planned initially, and has transportation-dependent businesses on a one-way street in the center of the commercial district. It is extremely awkward. So I respect the fact that others have left it to us. I also understand, and I accept, that the modifications to the proposal appear to have fairly broad appeal. I have looked at our commercial use of public spaces bylaw, and wonder just what changes we actually have to make. And it seems to me that perhaps the only change we have to make to that bylaw is to broaden it to recognize that retail outlets may also use the public space. Because as I read it last night, I think that they are perhaps not permitted as are other establishments. And if that is all we need to do, I mean, we don't know whether retail will take the opportunity, but they should absolutely not be excluded. I think that the bylaw already provides that there can be incursion onto both the sidewalk and the street. And we cover the farmer's market, for example, under the same commercial use of public space bylaw, and they use a parking lot. So I don't think we actually have to change the bylaw to have an extension of a boardwalk onto a parking lane in front of a business. So I think there are minimal changes we need to make. To Councillor Butler's point about the aesthetic look, what we have described in our existing bylaw is that it has to pass the aesthetically pleasing viewpoint of administration. So it's recognized that we don't want to encourage a mess, but we haven't been prescriptive about the design. And there are different designs as you walk along the streets now, or at least when sidewalk seating is underway. They're different, and yes, we had one letter being critical of somebody's operation, but most of them, I agree with Councillor Butler, have maintained an appealing look. And of course they have to if they want to attract patrons anyway. So my question is council at this stage prepared to direct administration to come back with any suggested changes to our commercial use of public space bylaw, which would allow applicant businesses of any nature to expand potentially into the parking area adjacent or in front of their business premises? And then we could actually get moving on this, because it'll take some time to approve and amend the bylaw if that is what's needed. June 1st is still a target date, but it'll be ramping up throughout June. But the sooner we can get to this, the better. So are we at a position today to at least give direction to administration to come back with proposed changes to our existing bylaw to ensure that this can happen on a timely basis? Councillor McGrath, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Keller-Harempy, Councillor Journeau, Councillor Demota. Thank you, Councillor Butler. Mr. Furcho, would that be sufficient direction for administration to look at the existing commercial use of public spaces bylaw and see what amendments would have to be made? I think that there is a lot of discretion in that bylaw to allow business to expand into parking lanes now, although it hasn't been used. But I do see that there might be something that needs to be done to ensure that this opportunity is available to all businesses, not just the restaurant, food services industry. And it just seems to me that there was a lack in the original bylaw because it hadn't been considered.
Your worship, that's certainly doable. I believe there was some concern of just clutter in terms of retail on the street at the time we did the original bylaw, but that's certainly, for social distancing, that's a less of a concern. It's more about providing space, and the use of the parking stall, because it's so well established in Canmore. We've developed a strong link, as you know, with Canmore, and we have all that information now. So to bring a similar program here, they've done a lot of the research and background, so it won't take a lot of work on our end to propose something similar. So we'll be able to provide that by next meeting, no problem. And just one more thing, Your Worship, the item that I'd mentioned for the chamber, should council wish to hear from the Chamber of Commerce at all this morning, they are available to speak now too.
Thank you, Councillor Demota, and then Councillor Wilson.
I just wanted to clarify from my comments earlier, and just because I'm expressing some disappointment on the possibility of decisions being made at that level, I'm by no means speaking down to the people involved. And I just think even though that there are volunteers there are levels of expertise and stuff. And yes, we may have come to the point where we are right now. I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't anything personal. Now, Councillor Wilson mentioned something about reduced speed limits or made reference to that. And I think that needs to be put into consideration, and whether if people think it's going to automatically happen because, whatever decisions we make, I think that we should have some planning towards that, and maybe directing traffic to slow it down with some matters. I know that we may have some more electronic signs, but I think some consideration to a reduction if we're going to be pushing pedestrians closer to moving traffic should be considered.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Demoda. That's exactly where I was going. I would, not to tie it into patio seating, but I think the whole kind of ambiance of sitting on the patio and vehicles going by at 50 kilometers an hour may take away from it. So I would say I would kind of put forward a temporary slowing of traffic during the season of, and honestly, this season, vehicles are traveling at a slower rate, but I think we'd want to try and enforce some section of Connaught and some section of Patricia to slow traffic where patios are existing.
Thank you. I would just like to add a thought that escaped me earlier, but Mr. Furcho, as you consider changes to the bylaw, and perhaps this is simply within the discretion of administration when they issue a permit, but it is imperative, I think, that any boardwalks be flush at both ends with the curb so that there are no challenges or additional challenges for people with mobility issues. We have to recognize that if anybody is going to use space on the curb or outside the curb, nobody should be required to step down and up again, because some will be challenged by that. So just a technical issue, and perhaps it's just covered in the application in any event and doesn't need to find its way into the bylaw, but not to be overlooked. All right, thank you, Mr. Ireland. Appreciate your attendance once again. Is there anything else that we need to discuss with respect to public spacing in public places, or can we now leave that with direction having been given to administration to come back with proposed changes to the bylaw?
Well, I think this is great. The discussion's great, and I certainly welcome the sentiment that was shared that this is something that's an opportunity, hopefully, that if they want to, all the business sectors can look at. And I also appreciate the sentiment around maybe some urgency, because if we do go, if this is something that is an option to go forward with, I'd love to see that construction work be done by local carpenters and whatnot. So if there's a bit of transparency in terms of this being able to be something we can do, if we can get going on that soon, it'd be nice so we can kind of give the local carpenters and stuff enough time to be able to do as many as that are needed. So those would be my 2 comments. So, and thanks for letting me speak. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And before you leave, I have Councillor McGrath waiting, but I'm also going to invite Mrs. Pavlov, if the chamber is out there, if they want to speak, that's fine. If not, that's fine as well. But I will certainly give that opportunity, since Mr. Furcho just indicated that you were ready. But first, Councillor McGrath.
Just in line with what Mr. Ireland's comments were, I'm wondering if we can have some sort of an indication from administration as to how quickly this will move, so that if there is a possible timeline where we can give our businesses, a couple weeks to get prepared for changes. I think the more information that they have today would be really valuable in their planning right now for their operations.
Mr. Furcho, are you able to address that?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I was just 1 sec. Okay, just hold on.
Sorry, I wanted to just ask administration, with the timeline that we're looking at for this, is it reasonable to take the direction of working on the bylaw and bringing it back to council as a direction that businesses should start preparing for this? Or can we give a timeline or any more information to the businesses that will need to be starting the preparation for this, for planning their operations right away?
Your worship, through to Councillor McGrath, I guess the bylaw would simply just make the opportunity available should council approve it. There's no requirement to do so. So like I mentioned, we do have the information from Canmore, who's been doing this for years. So I believe we'll be able to have a package back to council next week without much trouble at all.
Thank you. Is there an indication from the Chamber of Commerce whether they wish to address
Your
the issue?
worship, yes, but we've had trouble. They can't seem to get in through, so I've got them here and I'm going to put them through my speaker here. We'll see if that works.
Oh yeah, this is going to work, I'm sure.
Are you ready, Patty?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Ireland and Council. I very late last evening sent to you the draft, and I want to underscore that part of it. The report that I have been working on now, it has taken about 6 days to contact all of the businesses that would be impacted in any way, shape, or form. So it is every single business that I have been able to locate. Upper floor, lower floors, main floors, non-exact street entrance off of Patricia or Connaught. And I have sent to you that document. The only reason why I didn't really want to see it on the agenda yet officially this morning was because there are still some respondents outstanding. And because it was a rush, I noticed even myself, there's a few clarification points that should be included for your consideration. Having said that, you can see overwhelmingly that there were 51 respondents who were in favor of this activity, definitively 100% in favor. There were 26 that were definitively opposed, and there was also 26 that were yes, no, with certain values applied. There are 4 pages of bullet points there that, and I've bolded in my report where recurring themes were. Everything you have discussed this morning so far has been included in there, so you'll see that you are definitely on the right track. The boardwalk idea was certainly quite popular. There was some concern about retail, and it was not just the aesthetics of it. It was also the prospect of damage to merchandise, potential for theft, the additional staff that would be required. So those were on the no side a little bit more. But having said that, I would say that virtually all of them have said that with those values applied, that they would be willing to make compromises. They would certainly be willing to work for the greater good to make this happen for the downtown community. And again, I'll just reiterate, aesthetics were one of the key things that were discussed. There was this concept that it needs to look appropriate. If I could indulge you for one additional moment, we have had some basic discussion with the Rotary group here in Jasper, who are in a position to give to the community about 18 hand sanitizing stations that would be spread out over Connaught Drive and Patricia Street. And we are going to work, hopefully this comes to fruition. What we would do is work with some of our business partners downtown and ask them to just supervise that, that they're secure at night, and that they would be also aesthetically pleasing and appeasing rather, and that they would also be responsible for maintaining that those dispensing units are maintained and they are full. So this is a Rotary project. It's not widely known yet because they're still very much in the development stages, but aesthetics is vitally important to that whole process, and so is the partnership of downtown businesses.
Right. Thank you very much for that report, Mrs. Pavlov, and thank you in particular for the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce undertaking that consultation piece on behalf of the community. It really is important, and as Councillor Keller-Horenthy noted, it is a bit like sticking your head in the lion's mouth. It's a touchy subject, but you undertook it willingly and effectively, and even though the report is not quite complete, there is certainly sufficient evidence already available from that report to help guide us in the decision. So I really do appreciate the undertaking that you assumed, and the report that you've given us today, or at least the draft report. Is there anything else from Councillor McGrath?
Thank you. And Mayor Ireland, I'm not sure if you would fit into this conversation as well, but I was speaking with Mrs. Pavlov yesterday, and thank you very much for including me in your questioning for all of the businesses, Mrs. Pavlov. I wanted to make sure that there is full awareness and that I take a moment to address the fact that I, as a councillor, and Mayor Ireland are probably one of the only ones that have business in the downtown core, and I want to just make sure that there's awareness that my business is not affected, and therefore I'm not in a pecuniary interest. There's no monetary gain or loss for me to make a decision or be involved in these conversations. It's my businesses aren't affected. So thank you for bringing it to my attention that there could be some perception out there, but I believe I'm fully able to discuss and vote on this issue without it affecting me personally.
Thank you for that, Councillor McGrath. I think I also mentioned the perception of conflict when Brett Ireland presented to us a couple of weeks ago, and I think also, firstly, it's questionable whether it's a pecuniary interest, but in any event, this is a matter that affects all business. It's not exclusive to your business or to my business. So there is a particular exception. I think it's under section 358K that says if it relates to all businesses, not a business that is exclusive to the councillor, then it is not a conflict. But thank you for raising that, because it is a concern, and perception is critical in all communities at all times. So I appreciate you raising that. All right, anything for Mrs. Pavlov other than thanks for a job well done? All right,
Thank you, Mrs. Pavlov.
We can leave this then. Thank you, Brett, for your continued work on behalf of the community. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everybody.
Brett.
We had as agenda item 7.3 physical social distancing methods used by Canadian towns and cities. I don't see a need particularly to go into that further. We're aware that communities are addressing this issue, but if we've given direction, unless any councillor wants to speak to any of the indications of what's going on in other communities, we can probably bypass that. But thank you to Mr. Jones for obtaining all of that for us. It was an interesting read, and I appreciated having that material. And we have now dealt with 7.4, public spacing in public places, which can take us to agenda item 8. We have just the tax rate bylaw for third reading. It having received certification from Parks Canada. Is there a motion from anyone to read that bylaw? Sorry, I don't have a number. 227 is my recollection. For the third time. Councillor Demota.
Are we able to, without the recommendation or the consent from Parks Canada, the okay?
We have, well, am I wrong? I thought we had the certification, but if we
Oh,
do not,
I thought you just said we didn't have the certification. I apologize. If we do, I'm ready to go.
We have
Mr. Purcho, can you confirm we have certification? Councillor,
Your worship, we do, yes,
yes,
sorry.
thank you. Councillor McGrath?
Sorry, I was just trying to bring our attention to the fact that it was in the agenda.
Yes, I thought that it was. So then, Councillor Demota.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought I heard you say that we didn't, and that's why I apologize. I saw it there, and I just wanted to say that I misheard.
We will blame that on the internet connection. All right, we do have certification, and it is bylaw number 227. So might I have a motion from somebody that Councillor read for the third and final time, bylaw number 227. Councillor Kelleher-Empey, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? There is one opposed. That is carried. All right, before we move on to agenda item 9, it is now 5 to 11. We've been going for about an hour and a half. I will call a brief recess. Let us say 11:05, a 9-minute recess. Thank you. We will reconvene then. We would reconvene. If anybody was paying attention, they confirmed that I cannot add. I said 9 minutes and it was 11, but here we are. And I think that we are all back. Councillor Demota, yes, there you are. All right, we are at agenda item 9.1, virtual meetings and public participation discussion. And we have a report from Ms. Byrne. Did you want to address that at all from Peggy's Cove or wherever you might be?
Yes, I'm here from beautiful Peggy's Cove. It's chilly. That's not true. So right here, we just have some discussion options of how council would like to proceed with virtual meetings. Right now, we are through Zoom and recognizing it's a little bit different as we transition. You'll see in the report that, of course, the public is welcome to address council in various amounts of ways. However, in a physical council meeting, we don't have a chat, nor do we have virtual hand raising. It's up to council and the chair to acknowledge how they would like people who would like to address council physically during the meeting. So this is here for discussion to see how council would like to proceed with some procedures around virtual meetings. As you'll see in the report, our intent is to conduct a virtual meeting as close to possible as how we would conduct meetings in the Jasper Library and Cultural Center. So recognizing there's a bit of growing pains. So that is here for discussion. We are proposing, today we gave it a little test run, to live stream through YouTube, and therefore the public would watch the meetings through YouTube and not actually log into Zoom. Anyone who's actually going to address council verbally or speak to a report, they would get the Zoom contact and then be able to speak through Zoom. Everyone else would watch through YouTube. However, we'll have to see how that goes after this morning. Not sure if that's a feasible option.
All right, thank you for that report. Councillors, views on the subject? Councillor McGrath, and then Councillor Keller-Harampy.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I think today's agenda is really well put together, where the information reports section, and we could discuss the agenda and where we wanted agenda 7.1 to be more aligned with agenda item number 10, and the fact that the letters from the community are under correspondence for information, consideration, or action, just as they would be in a regular council meeting in council chambers. I'm happy with the way that it's worked today. I do think that the internet bandwidth was probably too great to achieve that live streaming, but there's no issue with public attending through Zoom if they're here live, and then us doing what we were doing in previous weeks by posting the YouTube video to online so that people that weren't here live can also have that information available to them. I'm happy with everything administration has done, but I'm also open to hearing suggestions from others.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Keller-Harampy.
I also like the way it proceeded today, where we can align presentations with items on the agenda. It just seems to move more fluidly. Again, the letters are coming in, the emails are coming in, we're getting them, and that's how it would work if we were in a public session. I think if somebody really would like to speak to a subject as similar in the public, then they can always if they come into Zoom, they can put up their hand, and it's up to the mayor whether he recognizes them and allows them to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Harampy. Other views, comments? Councillor McGrath.
Sorry, one last thing, Mayor Ireland, and I recognize that chairing a Zoom meeting is probably a little more complicated, and you do have a pretty big role in facilitating these meetings for the most part. I think that if Councillor Keller-Harampy's suggestion of us acknowledging raised hands was to be the will of council, it would be really helpful if we had someone such as Ms. Byrne available to facilitate those comments, where when I've observed other council meetings, they had administrative support available to them for those little details, so that the chair, as the mayor, has just more focus on the meeting and points that you want to raise, rather than just working on the details of the technology.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate those comments. When we did have the virtual raised hands, it was easy to miss those, and administrative support would be welcome. However, there have been suggestions that another approach might work as well, and that is raise your hand at least 24 hours before the meeting. That is to say, if you want to comment on an item on the agenda, let us know suitably in advance, and that can be organized, and then it doesn't leave it to either the will of the mayor or even the will and determination of council. If a citizen wants to address a matter that is on our agenda, other communities, Banff being one, have found a way to allow that to happen. So a person who wishes to address council regarding a matter that is already on the agenda can do that, and they do it after the agenda comes out, but within, well, I'm saying 24 hours, but we could set the date. And then they can make those presentations, and it removes any opportunity for anyone to complain that one person has been recognized and another has not. So earlier today, I noted we had 109 participants. Right now we have 105. If they had the capacity and all raised their hands, we would be overwhelmed. We simply could not deal with that. So I think that we should construct rules that do not leave us exposed to that. And I think that we have knowledge of ways to deal with that. So I'd be inclined to go that way. Councillor Butler?
Thank you. I am in agreement with the approach that I think you were referencing. Mayor Ireland, and this isn't really with respect to online meetings, but just meetings generally, I've come to feel like we put our agendas out on Friday, and that is really the first opportunity for most people to learn what issues we're going to be discussing and what is on the agenda. And I think it's really appropriate to allow people, say, until the end of day Monday, end of business Monday, before a Tuesday meeting, to contact administration and say they'd like an opportunity to speak on an issue, not deliver a presentation, but maybe just express an opinion. And I think that's a really good balanced approach, as opposed to simply sort of an open invitation for people to raise hands during a meeting, which we haven't previously really allowed, with some exceptions, during in-person meetings. Because I think we have to make sure that there is a distinction that a council meeting is not a town hall. It is not a place for anyone and everyone to weigh into the debate. But at the same time, by our current practice has been, if you wish to address council, you have to say so before the agenda comes out, and that's not really a reasonable expectation since you don't know what's on the agenda. So I'd really be in favor of formalizing the opportunity for people to indicate their wish to speak to an agenda item before the end of the day of business, the day prior to a meeting. And then it seems further that those comments should be placed in the agenda when that agenda item comes up for conversation and before council considers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Other comments? The only additional comment I would make is with respect to advance notice of those who wish to make presentations. And so our current procedure bylaw requires 2 weeks notice. And we have gone to a weekly schedule that probably will not be permanent, but it may last for a while yet. And so at least during the continuation of our weekly decision-making meetings, it might be worth considering whether we shorten the advance notice for those who wish to make presentations, because I think we're allowing them in any event, or at least we have been, but we're probably in breach of our own rule by doing that. So I would like to hear from council whether, at least on a temporary basis until we revert to 2 meetings per month and 2 committee of the whole meetings, we perhaps shorten the time to 1 week if somebody wants to make a presentation. I saw a nod and a thumbs up from Councillor Butler and Councillor McGrath and Councillor Keller-Harempy. All around. All right. Thank you all for that. Would that be sufficient, those 2 items then covered, Ms. Byrne, for you to proceed with proposed changes to, again, the procedure bylaw so that we could capture those 2 elements? That is the opportunity for members of the public that wish to speak to an item on the agenda to do so after the agenda comes out, but before the meeting, they can get themselves on the list. And we would just have to be informed the day of the meeting that had happened, but there would be a page holder on the agenda to recognize an opportunity for that with the agenda item to which the comments relate, and then shortening the notice provision for presentations to 1 week from 2 weeks.
Yes, that's good.
Excellent. Is there anything else then with respect to virtual meetings? Councillor Demota.
Well, I was just going to ask council, and I'm not sure if it's anywhere on the agenda or if somebody was going to bring it up in new business, about reverting back to our old meeting schedule with committee of the whole on the 2nd and 4th weeks of the month, 2nd and 4th Tuesdays, to go back to our current format, which is 9:30, and then regular meetings on the 1st and 3rd to the 1:30 format, including going forward with virtual, our virtual aspect of the meeting.
Councillor Wilson?
Well, originally I was against the change in meeting format, but I think at this point we're making some pretty timely decisions, and I think that throughout the month of June, I think we should carry on as we are. And it is not only to avoid me chairing meetings, but I think no, I think that we are making some pretty timely decisions at this point, and I don't think we're there yet, Councillor Demota. But I do see that, you know, throughout the summer maybe we revert back to it. But at this point, I think we should carry on as is.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Wilson. And it's worth pointing out that really the only meaningful change is that by having a regular meeting weekly, we allow ourselves to pass a motion and make a decision any week. Our meetings can still be in the spirit of, any meeting can be in the spirit of a committee meeting, that we sort of encourage open conversation as opposed to decision making. The only thing I'm concerned about is that we have to be cautious that we don't impose too tight timelines on administration. And it has come up once or twice. We asked for some input on the street seating issue a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. And I think administration felt kind of pressured to come back to us within a week. And in their schedule, that's just a matter of days, because by the time they discuss their response and put together some ideas, place it on an agenda for the following Friday, they have a couple of days to work on this. So let's just be sure that when we're asking administration for to do work, that we don't necessarily just say, well, can we have that at the next meeting? Maybe 2 meetings, 2 weeks hence is a good working plan when we do feel we have the time for that. Thank you.
Councillor Calagrante?
I agree with that too. You know, these council meetings, as Councillor Wilson said, like, we have to get more decisions made, but I do think, you know, we have to be mindful of administration. Last week I was listening to the town hall meeting for the municipal affairs, and Dr. Hinshaw and both the ministers said that actually if councils wanted to go back to public meetings, we could. We just couldn't allow the public in, that they'd have to Zoom in. So I was just wondering, is there any desire on behalf of council, if we social distance, that we actually could go back into having in-person meetings?
It's an interesting question. I think that we would have to consider whether we would have an expectation that staff would also be required to be there. That changes the numbers in the room and the dynamics, and I would want more than council to be comfortable with that scenario. So I think it's something to ask of administration in addition to council. This format seems to work well. I'm not sure. When we did try a Zoom meeting with one camera trying to capture all of council, it did not seem particularly effective to me, but I have no technical expertise. I'm sorry, there were councillors with their hands up and I wasn't making notes. I apologize, but Mr. Furcho, I'll let you go in, and then other councillors, just put your hands up again.
Your worship, to council, just so you're aware, like, we did start to work on wiring the council chambers so that in the future there will be a wide angle camera mounted on the ceiling with the microphone system that council currently uses would be the patch in, so it wouldn't be all echoey and it would actually properly work. However, there is a global webcam shortage because everybody's gone to virtual meetings, so we haven't been able to source that webcam yet. Joe's working on getting us set up, so we're hoping to be there in June at some point, closer to the end of June probably, but then the room will be set up and ready. So as you remember, I had quite a Mickey Mouse setup going on there and it wasn't perfect. This seems to work better. once the room is properly wired, you can expect a more professional presentation from that room.
Thank you, Councillor Butler, then Councillor Demota.
Yeah, and you know, the first meeting we had during COVID, I think 3 of us met in council chambers, and we did use Mr. Furchow's jerry-rigged Zoom tie-in, and it worked surprisingly well considering he had a microphone duct taped to a iPad or something. And I just wanted to make the point that one of the things I've always struggled with in council meetings is that if we are wanting to hear from a member of staff or administration at any time during our meeting, often that staff member ends up sitting in our chambers for 2 or 3 or 4 hours when presumably they have other things that they would rather be doing. And I would certainly encourage, given how well Zoom worked in that one experience, in giving staff the opportunity to Zoom into meetings even when we do begin meeting in person, because it seems like just a better use of people's time. And it's not that I don't want those staff sitting in chambers, but I can't escape the perception sometimes that we're using their valuable time and frankly sometimes boring them to death. And wouldn't it be nice if we could just, Mr. Furchow could just say to a staff member, okay, we're ready for you, pop your Zoom on and let's hear from you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Demota?
Well, I'd like to thank council for their patience and me yet extending another, some more time on a particular agenda item. But, there was some helpful conversations there, and I was merely wanting to consider administration in the process. So like Scott said, Councillor Wilson said, I'm in favor of continuing with this, and it has expedited our decision making and our ability to move with the changing times. So I'm great with everything that was said, and I'm okay with meeting virtually for now.
All right, so a discussion, well, 2 discussions to which we will return. That is reverting to our former practice of 2 council meetings and 2 committee of the whole meetings monthly when the time comes, but not just yet. And also then considering how we can continue to incorporate technology into all of our council meetings for the benefit of the public, of course, but also for the benefit of staff and council. So thank you for that. We can then get to agenda item 10, request for decision, and we have the Wildflowers Childcare Daycare and Out of School Care reopening issue back before us for a decision. And is Miss Daniel out there? There she is.
I am now, yes.
And you've been waiting at the Zoom all morning, I presume.
Pardon?
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so Your Worship, members of council, I appreciate your time again this week to discuss reopening Wildflowers childcare programs. Last week, we discussed that quality childcare is critical to workforce participation in our community. We are fortunate in Jasper to have access to award-winning, high-quality care for our community's youngest residents. I was honored to see so many letters from families, community members, and businesses recognizing the high quality of care children receive at Wildflowers programs. I want to say thank you to everyone that took the time to publicly engage on this issue. Your letters made all of us feel valued and supported, and we are missing your children very much. A number of letters touched on the importance of opening, even though we cannot meet the capacity we once had. I appreciate, excuse me, I appreciate this sentiment. I know a number of community members are concerned about the small size of out of school care and whether there will be a summer fun program. Neither of the school locations we regularly use for our childcare programs are available this summer. But I assure you that we're doing our best to find an alternate location and then license it for summer fun this year. There are many unknown factors in the coming months that will affect the economic viability of childcare services, making it impossible to know the exact costs associated with opening our programs. What I can tell you is that public investment in childcare gives back. Some say that for every dollar you invest in childcare programs, The economy receives $6 worth of economic benefits down the line. Not only are we giving a healthy, happy start, we are freeing up parents to work and contribute to the economy. These families choose to stay in Jasper, spend locally, use our facilities, and participate as active members of our community. Publicly funded, high-quality childcare does represent a valuable use of municipal funds. If no safe, appropriate, and affordable childcare is available, parents may not be able to re-enter the workforce, which will negatively impact our community's economic relaunch. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate your time and consideration again this week, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Daniel. Before I turn to councillors for questions, I did see Councillor Keller-Harampe with her hand up early, but we did defer the information report from the Wildflowers Parent Board, and I understand that Ms. Bayfield and perhaps Ms. Heiss are available. So if either one of them want to address council, this would be the appropriate time, and then we could open it to questions to either Ms. Daniel or to those representatives of the Wildflowers Parent Board. So Ms. Bayfield, if Mr. Virchow has been able to bring you in, so welcome. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Mayor and Council. Just wanted to say that one of the goals of the Parent Board is to raise funds for Wildflowers childcare and out-of-school care programs for special events and equipment. Another one of our goals is to lobby all levels of government for funding and space. Firstly, we would like to urge Council to take advantage of the remaining ECC funds, the grant, by opening the programs up in a limited capacity for June 1st. Secondly, we did offer $10,000 from our reserves to be used in one of two ways, either to help alleviate municipal council burden, or if Council chooses to honor the request for $103,000, then we offer the funds to be used as a buffer if required, should there be overages in the future. We understand that the programs are opening at a smaller capacity, but this opening is a start towards building back up the capacity and the needs of, as the needs and restrictions change. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your report and for your commitment to childcare. All right, councillors, Councillor Keller-Harampe.
Thank you, Ms. Bayfield, for your report and your kindness of the parents group to offer funds to childcare. My question is, I'm curious why the schools are not available for out-of-school program this summer, because we have a joint use agreement. So I'm not understanding why those facilities are not available this year. Ms. Daniels.
I can't speak directly for the school boards, but I can tell you that due to COVID-19, I think, and also previous to COVID-19, there were some budget cuts as far as the Francophone board, and they decided not to allow community groups in any of their schools in Edmonton. So École de Rocher follows that board out of Edmonton, Centre Nord, I think it's called. And so that's a board specific decision they've made for this year. As far as Grand Yellowhead and the Jasper Elementary School, we are still negotiating a new joint use agreement with them. And currently they're not allowing community groups in for the summer, according to their facilities procedures.
May I continue, Mayor Ireland?
Yes, go ahead.
Maybe that's something that council and Mr. Virchow, maybe we need to write a letter to the Grand Yellowhead board expressing that we would like to use the schools, because we do have a joint use agreement. And I would think with the schools empty, that this may be a great opportunity to use some of those classrooms and bring our program fully back for the out-of-school care.
Mr. Virchow?
Just your worship, through to Councillor Keller MP, the joint use agreement has quite a number of parts and pieces to it that need some negotiation. So I haven't involved council in that yet, but we as admin are certainly preparing for that. It's overdue for a renewal, but there are some concerns on both sides. So I'll see what I can do to bring that back, even if we want to look at this one individual part, but there is quite a number of parts to that still need some work.
May I continue? Just one more thing, Mr. Mayor
Go ahead.
Ireland, on this. Have we looked at the activity center and the curling lounge? Because there's bathrooms there. Also, there's rooms in the basement with some bathrooms for expanding the daycare program.
Yes, Mrs. McNabb and myself have been discussing this since last week about using the rooms downstairs or the curling lounge. The rooms downstairs would likely be the preference because they're separate rooms, so we could hold more children. There's also bathrooms down there as well. So we are working on making that happen. There's just some hoops to jump through right now.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Councillor Butler and then Councillor McGrath.
Thank you. I have only a brief question at the moment, at least. Mrs. Daniels, last week you gave us a excellent and detailed verbal report, and it was not included in our agenda. And I had asked at that time if it could be, and I thought I received a positive answer because there was detailed information in there that I wish had been made public. So I'm a little disappointed at that. It probably would have answered this question. Could you remind me what the usual number of full-time equivalent children in a normal year, not a COVID year, is? I was reading CFS reports from last fall, and I gather that we normally have about 75 spots filled full-time. It's filled by more than that number of students because some people are in there, some kids are in there part-time. Is that correct, that that's sort of an average number in a normal year of year-round equivalents for children in the program?
Yes, it's usually about 76 to 78 a day.
Right.
And that encompasses between 90 to 100 families.
Thanks. For now, that's all I have. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath to be followed by Councillor Wilson and Councillor Demota.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Daniel, for your report this week. And thank you very much, Mrs. Bayfield, for your report as well. I think it's really wonderful to hear from the parent board of the Wildflower Center. And during these times, it's especially nice to see and feel the energy working towards a common goal and working together. So thank you very much for stepping up and offering a contribution to the funds to reopen. Mrs. Daniel, I'm not sure if you received the email yet that I had forwarded to administration through our CAO, or if Mrs. Waxer is aware of this yet, but I had reached out to our MLA last week, and I did have a pretty meaningful conversation with Kristen Burt of the Early Learning and Childcare Specialist out of Lloydminster. She's in our North Zone. She did send me a written confirmation of our conversation just so I could forward it on to the rest of council and administration, that the minister has committed to allow the use of funds up until June 30th, as you stated last week. But there has been no other direction. Round 1 funds are what we're under. Round 2 funds have been demanded back by the province, but round 1 funds have not. So there is no direction yet. And I was trying to ask Mrs. Burt how that would go about and how expedient that would be. And she said likely it would just be a minister making a request for the funds to be returned, and that would happen. But there has been no indication or communication around that as of yet. So while I feel like that's somewhat helpful, it's not any assurity that we will be able to utilize those funds for the future. But I stand committed to working with the province and using our MLA and using the tools that we have available to us to advocate as much as possible for using these funds. And thank you very much to both you and all of the residents in Jasper who have demonstrated through kindness the need and desire to open our Wildflowers childcare facility. I am in favor of funding the daycare to reopen, and I hope that we can do that and come to a decision today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Just a couple questions for you, Mrs. Daniels, and then a question to council as a whole. I guess the first one is 103,000 requested. How many students is that? Will that support?
We've based it off of 24 for the daycare and 8 for out of school care for right now. But that doesn't mean that it can't increase dependent on what the public health regulations are and when we can get up to a more cost recovery type system. When you missed last meeting, but I'm not sure if you watched the video, but the need right now is not greater than that, according to what I've polled the parents. So that's what we decided to start with.
Okay, if the need grows, though, which I'm assuming it will, how quickly can we grow the number, the 24 numbers? I'm sure it depends on quite a few scenarios, but is the 103,000, would it allow us to grow those numbers, or should we be asking for more in preparation to welcome more children to the daycare?
It could go both ways. We could need less and we could need more. It really depends on the health regulations and what we're allowed to do at Wildflowers. If we can start to do more float staff or mixed groups, then no, we wouldn't need more money. If we continue to stay at 10 per room, that's 8 children, 2 adults, and can't go beyond that, then yes, we probably would need a bit more money if we were to expand past the 24.
Yeah, like most likely we're going to be moving towards the, non-COVID year of 76 or 78. So I think we should be asking for more money or approving more money at this point in preparation. We should budget towards welcoming more children back. So I would support a larger ask, knowing that we will most likely need it before the end of the year. I just state as well, like, I don't ever see us reaching what's considered a reasonable cost recovery. I don't think that's the reason why we offer this service. I think it's an essential service that the municipality uniquely offers. I know other communities don't offer it, but it is an essential service to many families, as we know, and has been seen by the parade of cars that somehow figure out how to live. So yeah, of course, it affects 90 to 100 families in our community, many businesses. So I guess to council, I'd just like to, I would have preferred, of course, I don't want to open any fresh wounds, but I would have preferred to have forecasted a reopening of the Wildflowers childcare, daycare, and out of school care, and then could have budgeted accordingly. But unfortunately, we're here. So, but my only issue during past meetings, I guess 2 meetings ago, there was quite a bit of reassurance that the money is there. The money is there. I think Councillor Keller-Anthony, you spoke to it quite specifically. So I am a little bit more in the dark. I don't know where that money is, and I hope that the rest of council can enlighten me. And I'd really like to allocate money towards reopening as soon as we can. And if other councillors have a bit more knowledge of where we can access this money, let's get going on this, because I think we're obligated to move. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Demota?
Those are good questions, Scott. What I wanted to make reference to, and thank you, Ms. Daniel, for your presentation again, and to Ms. Bayfield for the support that you're willing to offer. I think that for the parent group, it takes a lot more effort for you to generate the $10,000 that you're willing to contribute, and I think that once we start opening it up, or the province lets the ability for more children to be allowed into daycare and out of school care, that $10,000 you could probably use that to a better assistance to your programs than adding to opening up going forward. And I think I would like to you take advantage of the LCC grant that's available, and if we can extend the time period on phase 1 and beyond June 30th. And I spoke to a few parents yesterday, and it was said to me that we have an engaged group in our community that are maybe willing to assist us and maybe lobbying to higher levels of government. Maybe this is a good opportunity to band together and maybe engage our ministry to reconsider an extension on the ELCC grant, and that could help us with funding going forward. And having said that, we do have reserves available as well as money in CFS that could be looked at for helping fund that. But I'm in full support of moving forward to getting this open as soon as possible. We need to get people back to work. We need to get our essential services workers back there, and then so on and so forth once we start expanding.
Councillor Wilson, I see your hand, but I had some questions first before I turn back to you. And I apologize, Ms. Daniel, but I've struggled sort of throughout the last week with the numbers I heard from your presentation, and I just want to get some clarity. And to Councillor Wilson's point, maybe it doesn't really matter because it's all a bit of a guessing game anyway, because the rules can change and our numbers can change. But your plan now is based on 3 cohorts of 10 each, which is mandated. So that's 8 children and 2 staff per cohort. And that matches what you say is the demand currently. Could more cohorts be accommodated within the existing space before we look at other spaces? Or is a maximum of 3 cohorts all you can manage in the existing space?
When I originally wrote the report a couple weeks ago now, 30 was our max allowed. Since then, the regulations have changed and it's groups of 10. So we have 5 rooms at the daycare. So we could take 40, I think it is, with then having 10 staff on top of that. So 50 in the center. They're not putting a maximum on people per center anymore, but they're maximizing it per room. So it's 10 per room, 8 children, 2 staff.
Okay. And assuming, perhaps falsely, that there will be increased demand and no diminishment of ability, at what point might we expect to see some economies of scale? It just seems to me that as we grow the numbers, we should see some efficiency in operation. So at 76 or 78 children, whatever the max was pre-COVID, I think you gave us an indication last week that the per child municipal tax subsidy was something over $100 for daycare per child. And now it is, I think your number was 416. So I would assume, but perhaps incorrectly, that as our numbers grow, so does efficiency, and that 400 starts to retract back down toward 100. Do you have any information about when we or where we could expect those numbers to start to change?
Normally, your theory would be correct, that the more children we have, it would be an economy of scale. However, with the new regulations, we can't mix groups of children. So before, we could start the day off with all of the children grouped in one room and then break off into rooms, say at 8:30, and then group them all together again at the end of the day, and then go down in staff. Right now, we're not allowed to do that. So I can't really predict when that will change. But that is where you would start to have the more efficient costs.
All right, thank you. And with forbearance from council, just a few questions about the actual dollar amount. So of the $102,000 amount that you have identified, approximately 14,000 relates to previous reduction of funding from council, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So that takes the ask in some senses down to 88,000. I'm just trying to clarify what the additional expense ought to be. So that goes down then, new ask, 88,000. But of that 88, am I right in calculating that 24,000 of that relates to out of school care rather than daycare?
I haven't done the math, but I would say that's pretty close. Yeah.
Okay.
Looking at it, yeah.
Yeah, so that leaves us with about a $64,000 new ask for daycare.
Yes.
Right. And then of that, previous to this, there was a subsidy of a little over $100 per child, and now the subsidy, this is from the municipal taxpayer, would be just over $400. So then, would I be right in saying that about 75% of that 64,000 is the new ask, because some of that would have been there because we are already subsidizing anyway? I'm just trying to put some relative strength to these numbers, and it seems to me that the new ask is actually a lot less than $102,000, at least as it relates to daycare, and then it's all additional for out of school care, because there was no subsidy for out of school care, as I understand.
I want to say a blanket yes, but you lost me a little bit. Yes, for the contribution to out of school care, you're right. That is brand new. There was no subsidy before that. For daycare, yes, there was a subsidy before that. So we are adding 64,000 onto that. The cost per space or per child, I didn't figure it out based on the new number, the previous subsidy plus the $64,000. So I don't want to say a yes to that, but the total numbers are correct.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to get some relativity. And then my final questions on this subject relate to the relationship between out of school care and daycare. And you've only forecast 8 people in out of school care. Does that reflect the demand, or what is the limitation on that number?
So originally, when I did this report, again, we were limited to how many children we could have in our facility. So at that time, if we're using other rooms for the daycare and we can't use the school for out of school care, that was the only room that was left, was having one cohort. So that would be 8 children, 2 adults. I do have to say that right now it meets the need for out of school care from the parents I've polled, but a lot of parents are looking for summer care. So right now for June, we would be meeting the need, but for July and August, we might not be.
And do you see the two as inextricably linked, or could council approve daycare and not approve out of school care?
That's a tough question. It's like, which child do you like better? I feel
Well,
like no, they would be they would be linked. I don't think I could approve one without the other. There's siblings having that would need care in both programs. So I think that if you don't approve one, then we might not have a return of some of the children to the early learning program.
Okay. All right, I appreciate that. I don't understand the inner workings, obviously, very well, so I was compelled to get that clarification. And that number, though, of 8, what would be the normal number in out-of-school care in a pre-COVID time?
In pre-COVID time for after-school care, usually 35 to 40 a day. During spring break and school breaks, it's usually a little bit less, but in the summer for the full days, we usually have 45 a day.
All right. I have one more question, but I'll save that for later.
Okay.
Other, Councillor McGrath. I'm sorry, Councillor McGrath, I apologize. I had forgotten that Councillor Wilson had his hand up earlier. I did make a note and I overlooked him. So Councillor Wilson and
Thank you. No, it was just a response to Councillor Demota. He suggested there was money in CFS to support this, and I don't think that's true. But then again, he did discuss reserves, and I'm definitely dip into those, open up this service, but I don't think that that's what reserves are meant for. I think, again, budgeting money to reopen would have been more prudent, but at this point this year, we should be diving into the reserves, I guess, if that's where other councillors suggested the money came from. And I'm looking forward to hearing from other councillors to let us know like where that money was suggested to be accessed.
thank you, Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Ms. Daniel. My question is, with the expenses and revenues, it leaves us with 24 kids, $10,000 short for the daycare facility per month, and with 8 kids in out-of-school care, $4,000 short per month. As the numbers grow, would it be accurate to say that every 24 kids costs $10,000 to the municipal taxpayers? Like, could we quantify groups of 24 being $10,000 and groups of 8 in out of school care being $4,000? Or am I wrong with thinking about the offset of revenues and expenditures in that way?
I think it would be close. I think the staffing costs would definitely increase, but the general expenses that are listed on that spreadsheet wouldn't change. They would be the same as if we had 24 or 76. They're just our regular expenses that we would accumulate. So I think that the staffing costs would definitely increase, but the other expenses would stay the same.
Councillor Keller-Hrenty.
So, Mr. Daniel, just to clarify, we cut 1,000 out of the FCS budget, but the new money requested is new money that we need to move forward. Am I correct?
I'm sorry, Councillor Keller-Hrenty, you cut out at the very beginning of that. There was a dollar amount that you said.
So we cut 14,000 from the budget. However, if that 14,000 was back, you'd still be asking for an additional 88,000. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct.
So that's new money you need.
Yes.
I have another question for you. So you're saying that there is no more demand than 24 and 8 at this time?
At this time, yes.
When do you see that as an increase? Like, for out of school care? Say you
for out of school care, the demand would increase in July for sure. I've definitely had a number of parents inquiring about summer fun and whether that program is going to happen. So I do see that that program would increase right away. As far as the early learning program, I'm not sure. I think it would depend on families and their need for care and whether they're going back to their jobs or whether they're making it work with other family members.
I have also a question. So if the schools do not participate this year, if you're out of school care for the older children from summer fun, have we thought about the Legion? It used to have the French school. It has a number of rooms there. Also, it has bathrooms, and it was set up for children in the first place. Have you looked at that location?
Not recently, but yes, in the past we have thought about it for sure.
Other questions from councillors? Comments? Councillor Wilson.
So are we looking for a motion to find or to ask administration to find the funding to open daycare for 24 $103?
Well,
or is there a written motion out there?
Just checking the agenda package, and I don't see a motion specific to this other than, I suppose, the recommendation. On page 38 of our agenda, that I presume is the motion that's recommended. Although it says we discuss a funding plan, so that's not something that is particularly actionable.
Some councillors have been quiet on the question, I guess. Where can we find this money at this point? There is wording in Councillor Butler's motion regarding childcare, but also regarding opening of the activity center eventually, if like plan for it to be closed, but plan for it to open as well. So where did we plan and where did we put the money, or where did we decide or think we were going to get the money to open these services when they are available to open, I guess, is my question to council.
Councillor McGrath and then Councillor Keller-Hempy.
Mr. Furcho, would it be possible, if there are no longer questions for Mrs. Daniel, that we could have our Director of Finance on the screen to ask her some financial questions, please?
Your Worship, through to Councillor McGrath, our Director of Finance is not available today for questions, but the response simply is that, you know, if we haven't taxed for those dollars, then we either need to find them from reserves, or we do it through a debenture, or we defund a different department. So there isn't a lot of choices available, but those are the places.
Councillor Keller-Hempy.
Unfortunately, I don't have in front of me the spreadsheet, but we had, Mr. Furcho, am I correct? This year we had $1.1 million slated to go into reserves totally, and we took 273,000 from that towards the customer, correct?
That's correct. The transfer to reserves, we did reduce that in order to make up some of the shortfall in taxation revenue. That's correct.
So if we were to take the 100,000 from the reserves of this year that was slated to go into the reserves, we'd be able to cover it that way. Am I correct?
It would just simply reduce the amount of money available in the reserves for whatever that specific reserve fund is for. Some of them, there is no room left to reduce. Some of them there is. I would anticipate it would be just the general administrative reserve that we have going forward. And then just back to, you know, in the future, setting up potentially a rate stabilization fund so that we can address these kind of ups and downs through the years.
Mr. Furcho, how much money was slated to go into FCS reserves this year?
I don't have that in front of me. I'd have to dig that up.
And
I don't
also,
believe- that one does not have a lot going into it. I probably could get Ms. Waxer to answer that, but there's not a lot in that one.
and is there money in their reserves?
I don't believe there's a lot. That's one of the ones we wouldn't really be able to draw down on very far, but I could get that information once again.
Thank you.
Councillor Demoda and Councillor Butler are next in line, but Ms. Daniel, were you able to answer that particular question? If so, go ahead.
I can answer that question. Well, I can speak for the childcare programs. We were slated to put 15,000 into reserves, 5,000 for out of school care and 10,000 for the daycare. And I believe the childcare programs have somewhere around $40,000, $35,000 to $40,000 in reserves.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Demoda and then Councillor Butler.
I can defer to Councillor Butler. Lisa, Ms. Daniel answered some of my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Butler and then Councillor Journeau.
Thank you. Our audited financial statements indicate that we have about $4 million in reserves. It's at council's discretion to redirect those reserves as we feel necessary. If there's $40,000 in childcare reserves, I find it difficult to accept that we're being asked to put an additional 100,000, or maybe it's 80,000 or something. When there is money in reserves, I don't know what childcare reserves would be for, if not for this kind of a rainy day. But I would make the point that it doesn't really matter, because reserves are reserves are reserves, but we have money. And furthermore, we'll be recuperating the tax reduction that we provided this year over the next several years. So we'll have money. We're not broke. What I would like to take this opportunity to talk about, I've kind of been waiting, because like Councillor Wilson, I'm wondering if we're going to have an actual motion that we're going to refer to or not. And I was going to mention this under that. So I'll just ask Mayor Ireland, are you foreseeing that we're going to have a motion today, or where are we going? Because I have some thoughts I want to put on the table, but really honestly relative to the motion, because I would be in support of the motion. I'd just like to know where we're going with that.
And I would very like to be able to have a motion on the table, but as you indicated earlier, we can conduct any meeting in the nature of a committee of the whole meeting, and we've fallen into that. Lots of lengthy discussion with Ms. Daniel, but as Councillor Wilson indicated earlier, it perhaps is time for a motion, and I would be happy to entertain a motion. The matter did come by way of notice of motion previously, and it is here for decision today. So when we get to the point of somebody making a motion, I would welcome that. In the meantime, I have 3 councillors wishing to speak, maybe one of them wishing to make a motion, but Councillor Journeau, Councillor Demoda, and Councillor McGrath.
Not sure if you can see this. Anyways, I was trying to point out an article to the Globe and Mail that 46 ways our world is about to change. And our world is about to change. And we are being forced to face the first item, which is childcare, to maintain the same program. And that's not possible. I think we have to put some parameters at the outset, and one of them is cost recovery. I'm not opposed to supporting funding the daycare. We already provide free space. We already provide the accounting. We provide the utilities. But if we're going to start providing money, and this is for 24, which amounts to $5,000 per child, I think if we're going to start providing money, it should be to families in need, income need. So that's low income, single parents, and the like. And so how do you determine that? Well, we already have thresholds that have been established in the community or in our society. And we use income thresholds for senior citizens. So in other words, you want to get into senior citizen housing, you have to demonstrate that you're in the low income bracket and can qualify. And I think that that's where we should be. And I think we should continue on that vein. And then as the spaces become available, you would think that it would be people who can afford to pay more, and they should be more on the cost recovery. So I would like to see some limits that, you know, where the discussion is, well, we're going to provide 100,000 for 24. If it goes to 48, well, where we're going to be, it's going to be open-ended. I would certainly like to see some limits and some controls. And if we're providing public money, it's to go to needy families. I see businesses who have indicated that they're, you know, support reopening the daycare. I think that they should be probably asked to fund so that we can make it more of a cost recovery. I don't think that the childcare should be a public expense. It has been, thanks to the previous, to the government of Alberta, but that is discontinuing. So we have to change. There's changes coming. We have to change. And we are going to be faced with many more requests because of changes. So I know it's a hard line, but again, the money that we provide should go to people in need. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeannot. Councillor Demota.
Okay, please forgive me for the confusion of this vortex that we're in. Sometimes I feel like I'm getting spun around with numbers. So the funding that's being requested, to me, if we don't make a decision today on the 102,000 or 103,000, whatever number is being floated out there, are we saying that we cannot open the daycare as of Monday if we wanted to go with a June 1st, or is the funding needed to be in place to go beyond June 30th when the ELCC grant, if it runs out at that time? And then I do have a second question after that, if Ms. Daniel can answer that.
So last week, because we didn't make a decision, we stated that we probably wouldn't open until June 8th. If you decided today that we could reopen, I would do my very best to get open for Monday, but that would be a rush. So it would more likely be later on in the week. If you didn't decide today and pushed it another week, it would probably be a little bit longer. I can't ask staff to return until you say, you make a decision or tell me how to move forward. So that was that question. For the ELCC grant, as long as we are open in June, we could use some of it in June to support families with the $25 a day and cover staffing costs and some reopening costs.
Okay, I think that's kind of what I was getting at. Like if there is the ability, even if we didn't have this and you wanted to go and open, you have the provincial go ahead, and if we can use some of that ELCC funding for whatever it is to start up, and then if there's an extension on it, there's $194,000 there, if I'm not.
That's what we were given for the 3 months.
Right.
We don't have that much left, but it's probably around 140.
Okay, so having said that, if there is an extension on that, would that help alleviate the issue of the $103,000 going forward?
Yes, but
so then I was just saying, like, why can't we give the go ahead, get the daycare open, and then this is to council, and then, you know, maybe 2-3 weeks from now, if we haven't heard anything from the provincial government, then we look at accessing reserves or shuffling money from somewhere to make it happen. And, you know, maybe oh, sorry, I'll leave that to council. I don't want to get into a one-on-one debate.
Can I make a comment on that?
Please.
So Councillor Demota, if we do that, I agree with you that we would have the money to sustain ourselves for the first month. But then if you decide not to move ahead with it, we now have to lay staff off again. So I do think that we should maybe put a little bit more thought into that, because I wouldn't want to hire staff back and then have to lay them off again.
I believe the intention from council, I'm not speaking for all of council, but I think the intention is to keep moving forward. And then when the money is needed, to inject that to the program, and maybe not to the extent that is needed. And maybe there might be more that's needed. We don't know that. We didn't know that going into COVID. We didn't know that when we were making our decision to reduce expenses either. So I think that we have to be creative in our process. And for me, it's paramount to get people back to work and to get the families that need that right off the bat into having some support. And I want to work with you and council to work in a positive way to get these things going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. If I may, I have one question, one statement, and one motion. My question, Mrs. Daniel, for the spaces available, I've been hearing from a lot of special needs parents, and I hold them very close to my heart, as I know how hard it is being home with my children, and never mind adding the complexities of raising special needs children. So I'm wondering if you've given any thought to the allocation of, say, I'm not sure exactly the percentage, but say 1 or 2 spots in the daycare and 1 or 2 spots in out of school care, specifically for special needs children who require respite or whose families require respite during these really challenging times.
We've definitely given that some thought, and I would love to welcome all of those children back as well. The funding that goes along with children with diverse needs is called inclusive childcare support, and we have not got approval to continue using that yet. I've been talking with our licensing manager, Gloria Vandenberg, and we have not yet gotten a yes that we can then support aids for those children. So as soon as I have a confirmed yes from her, then yes, we will continue to support children with special needs.
Great, thank you for putting intention into that. My statement is, before I make this motion, I'd like to ensure that it's understood that I, as a counselor, and I'm sure others on council and the parent board, should be committed to advocacy for the ELCC grant to be used post June 30th. And that would then allow us to recuperate the money for our reserves to put back if it was deemed possible by the province. My motion is that council direct administration to use $35,000 from the child care reserves and to use $67,000 from general reserves to reopen the Wildflowers Child Care Center beginning of June.
Thank you. Councillor Journeau. Councillor Journeau.
Sorry. In line with my previous comments, I'd like to add an amendment of some sort so that the funding goes to families in need, financial needs, firstly. I'm not sure how to control that, but I don't think it's difficult for administration to come up with that, but I don't think it should be open just to everybody and then have low-income families not able to access it. And I'd like to put a qualifier there, certainly on that. They're the ones that really need, they're the ones that are going to be required to assist us with the reopening. They're the workers, the frontline workers, the backroom workers in the back, and they don't make a lot of money, and that's where our daycare funding should be going to. So I'd like to see some amendment there somewhere to that effect.
You are welcome, of course, to move to amend a motion. It seems to me that changes the nature of the motion, but I will leave it to Councillor McGrath to indicate whether she would accept that as a friendly amendment. If so, I think it would be important that we ask administration, perhaps Ms. Byrne, to see whether she can type that out and get the motion on the screen for us so we know exactly what we're talking about, particularly if it's then going to be amended. Councillor McGrath?
Just further to Councillor Journo's comment, I appreciate your perspective, of course, and respect your position. I would not be willing to amend this motion in that way. As a former outreach worker, I have lots of awareness of individual circumstances and situations in families that might appear to be one way, but on the inside are entirely different. And it is not our place to place judgment or any level of scrutiny, aside from perhaps an income test. But I'm not willing to get into the judgment of individual families, but I would suggest that your intention and your way of thinking be presented in a separate motion afterwards, that you could direct administration to move through the application process in a way in which you feel is appropriate. I just wouldn't be willing to add that to this motion, and I'm sorry for that.
Can we, sorry, Councillor Demota, a point of order?
Yes, sir. I apologize, and I believe that Councillor Butler's been sitting quietly there, and I didn't want to take away from this debate on the motion, but I thought that he had his hand up prior to Councillor McGrath, and he was trying to address something we were discussing. But if not, then maybe you've retracted that. I apologize.
Well, I was actually going to make a motion to try to move the conversation along. It would have been the same motion essentially. So I'll speak to the motion, but I think we should deal in order and address Councillor Journo's concern, make sure that he's finished for the moment or not.
I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you, though.
We have a motion on the table. We may have a motion to amend, but this is going to be a challenging exercise if I don't see wording. But if I don't have wording that can appear on the screen for everybody, Councillor McGrath, can you repeat, and I will take notes of your motion? I presume that you wrote it down.
Yes, I do. My motion is that council direct administration to use $35,000 from childcare reserves and use $67,000 from general reserves to reopen the Wildflowers Child Care Center at the beginning of June. Left open intentionally so Mrs. Daniel can operate however she can operate without a specific date in the motion.
Ms. Daniel?
I just want to clarify that when I said $35,000, that was my best estimate. Without Mrs. Malinchuk on the call today, I can't be exactly accurate, but that was my best guess from that. So I just wanted to clarify that Councillor McGrath knew that that might not be the exact amount.
Mr. Furcho, did you have a comment?
Yes, Your Worship. Just if we keep the motion simply to direct administration to fund that through reserves, that would give us more flexibility. Just because I'm a little concerned of defunding the reserve for wildflowers to that degree, if there is any kind of a need for equipment or something breaks or repairs or whatnot, we'd be left pretty short. So just if it's just left more of a general, let administration deal with which reserve fund, and we'll address that through some reserves from the wildflowers, but probably a lot from general, but we can deal with that.
Councillor McGrath?
I would like to amend my motion, please, Mayor Ireland, to read that council direct administration to use $102,000 from reserves to reopen the Wildflowers Child Care Center at the beginning of June. Thank you.
Thank you. We have clarity, I think, now on the motion. Councillor Journeau, it is open to you to make a motion to amend. Your suggestion was not accepted as a friendly amendment, but you can certainly move now to make an amendment, or you can make another motion later on.
I think I'll make a motion later on. I still find this too open-ended. You know, are we talking about 24 kids? What's going to happen if we get demand for more? I still find it too open-ended, and I will try and come up with a motion to put some limits on there. You know, we're funding this out of reserves, which is, I guess, essentially general funding as well. But to me, this is only for the next 7 months. What's going to happen in 2021, 22, thereafter? Things will change, and they will change a lot. Our financial health will not be all that good. So I'm not, I'm still looking for a better cost recovery rather than just take money out of reserves. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do here, but that's what I'm looking for. Thank
you. Any other, Councillor Butler, you wish to speak to the motion?
I do, thank you very much. And I would like to address in part the concern that Councillor Journeau just raised, at least with respect to ongoing operating expenses and our need to reduce. And please forgive me, I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes because I want to take advantage of this opportunity to highlight and I think contextualize a little bit of how we got here. And I'd like to start by saying I've been waiting for the motion because I'm in favor of the motion. I think affordable daycare is essential in our community. I think we all agree with that. None of us disagree with that. It's one of the most valuable services we provide, and thanks to the cavalcade that went by my house to reinforce that message, and all the many letters, because that helps us. These letters help us to understand what's important in the community. And clearly, we're going to put more money toward opening daycare, and I'm in favor of the motion because Councillor McGrath's motion specifically referenced that the new money is for reopening the daycare. My concern is with operating costs of the daycare, and my concern is with expense reduction, which has from the beginning entirely been Council's motivation in addressing our concerns. It was entirely the motivation in imposing some expense reductions. What I find frustrating is an immediate and overwhelming community response, and also from some on council, that the answer to the problem is to throw more money at the problem. And the answer to the problem of reopening the daycare is to put money to the problem. But council deals with these really high expense issues all the time, whether it's a water slide or a rink slab, we deal with it all the time. We had to upfund the water slide by $200,000, and one of our problems over what was originally asked for, and one of our problems is we have no idea what a water slide should cost, and so we're completely at the mercy of administration and contractors out there, end quotes. But we do have ideas about what it should cost to run a daycare, because it doesn't take very long to spend a little time on Google and just, you know, find out what daycare costs are. And because this question entirely got scripted around, should council give another $100,000 to open the daycare, we really haven't explored what I think is really at the root of the problem is, what can we do to reduce operating expenses? And that's not a question for now, we have to get reopened, but it is the question. I'm gonna share a screen. Oh, I can't share a screen. Well, I'll just do without it. In 2019 budget, daycare's expenses were $1.4 million. On top of that, there's an added community benefit that isn't really reflected in daycare's budget. And I don't have much trouble saying that that added community benefit is probably $100,000 or so, because we provide the space at no cost. And there are capital upgrades. The daycare doesn't need its own maintenance staff. It doesn't need its accounting department, as Councillor Journeau said. So this council and previous councils have been extremely supportive of daycare. But we spend $1.5 million a year, if you count that added community benefit, in daycare. And we support about 76 kids or 78 kids. And our per child per month daycare cost is well over $1,500 per month. It's probably about $1,600 per month. And somebody will probably correct me, but it's that kind of money. And we know that because we were told if we don't supply, put more money at it, our daycare fees would have to be $1,500 a month. And my problem is, I agree with everyone that affordable daycare is really important in this community. My problem is our daycare is not affordable. $1,500 a month is the kind of money that people pay for daycare in major centers like downtown Toronto for for-profit daycare. That's the kind of money people pay in for-profit daycare. And we're operating a not-for-profit daycare, partially community funded. So I don't care where the money comes from, whether it's from the parents who worked hard for their money that they're putting into daycare, or from the taxpayers who have worked hard to pay that money. That is an outrageously inefficient spend. And that's where the problem is. And that's why council has found itself, and this is just one example, found itself facing some really tough calls about where the heck is our money going and what is the payback for the community. We should be able to offer daycare with community funding at the $1,100 or the $1,000 that we've been able to in the past. But we're actually spending $1,500, $1,600 a month per child. And that's not sustainable. And at one point, it's not good enough to say, well, we'll throw more money at the problem. And what I wonder is why our community isn't in an outcry over why are our daycare expenses so high, instead of being in an outcry, well, throw more money at the problem. So we're going to face it, as Councillor Journeau said, we're going to face it next year, the year following, that we have to do something about this. And in these times in particular, the money faucet is drying up. We can't just keep putting more money into some of these services. And council wouldn't be doing our job. We would not be doing our job if we were not concerned about the cost of these services and where the money comes from, and are we being cost effective and cost efficient in these service provisions? And daycare is just one of them. So I have great concerns with the ongoing financial efficiency of continuing in the way we've been going on. I'm in favor of putting this money toward reopening the daycare, but we are pushing down the road again a real concern that we're going to have about why are our costs for some of these services so very high, because we can't just keep going back to the tax-paying public and saying, well, give us more money to fund these services. They expect us to provide them in a cost-effective manner. And I hope that even the daycare parents would expect nothing less of council. And I've gone through all this because I want to try to provide a little context for why your council has maybe given the appearance of being so resistant to providing more money in some of these instances. So I'm in favor of the motion, and thank you for allowing me to provide what I think is a little bit of context for how we got here.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I had a whole bunch of remarks that I was going to make about the importance of daycare, but I think that is beyond dispute. So I will leave those perhaps for another day, but I do have a slight amendment to propose to the motion myself, and I will present this in the nature of a proposed friendly amendment, Councillor McGrath, and you can tell me whether or not you agree. My suggestion is that the motion read that council direct administration to reopen daycare and out-of-school care at the beginning of June, with funding to come from reserves if necessary, and with a direction that administration investigate other sources of funding and report back to council. And my thinking is that reserves are certainly a backstop, but there are other things potentially at play, including the continuation of the ELC grant. There may yet be corporate donors who come forward. There might be other initiatives. And I don't know that we could easily just replenish reserves from that. But if the motion recognizes that we have a fail-safe, which is reserves, and the indication is appropriate reserves, but Mr. Percho has properly addressed why the daycare reserve might not be appropriate to use in its entirety. But it recognizes that we can do this absolutely from reserves if necessary. But rather than rush into that, I think there are still options that could be investigated, and I would not like us to limit any opportunity to find other sources of funding at this time. I think that complies with your general approach in any event, Councillor McGrath, that we do not stop our lobbying efforts. And typically transfers from reserves don't happen till the end of the year anyway. So I think we can say, go ahead and reopen. We've got you covered, but let's keep looking. Councillor McGrath.
Of course, I accept that friendly amendment. It's on point as always, Mayor Ireland.
Councillor Journeau. Thank you, Councillor McGrath.
Yes, very nice. Just one clarification. I don't think it's mentioned. This is for the current budget year. In other words, it's for till December 31st this year. We're talking about money to reopen, but it's to run the daycare for the balance of the year, basically. That would be a small amendment that's needed, in my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Namoda.
Well, I really like that, and I think that's kind of where I was trying to go, and I appreciate your insight and your vision in that level of discussion and presenting that forward. I would also like to, down the road, separate from this, I was going to save this till after, but while we're on the topic of reserves, when we did get our finances, our health check from our auditors, there was a $4+ million in reserves. I think we're required to have at least 2 in there, and we've made the commitment, if we can collect it, to add another $800,000 in there for this year. And if some of that comes for daycare, that's great. Or I mean, I'm glad it's there in case we need to use it. But I would like to see what, in specific, you know, aside from the $2 million that we have to have in general reserves, how much of the reserves that we have in there now are earmarked for specific departments or projects, because that might have some implications too. Just because the money's there doesn't mean like we can keep dipping into it if we're going to run out in a specific area. So it would be, I would like a little bit more of a detailed report, and if it is in our budget somewhere, then maybe just you know, us having a reference to that so that we can understand if we have to go there, that we understand where it's coming from.
Anything further? Ms. Daniel.
I just wanted to clarify some points by Councillor Butler, just for the general public, so they kind of have an idea of our budget. Yes, there was 1.4 million in expenses last year, but we also brought in 1.28 in revenue. So the municipal contribution was only 131,000. I just wanted to clarify that the municipality doesn't give us 1.4 million to run the program. It's 131,000. And when I started about 10 years ago, it was over 200,000. So I do want to say that we have made strives to reduce that contribution, but yes, it still is, there is a municipal contribution.
Thank you for that. Councillor Butler, you can respond, and then I'll go to Councillor Wilson.
Sure, thanks. And Mrs. Daniels, I absolutely, thanks for clarifying that, because I was attempting to talk to, you know, our overall operating budget. And if anyone had the impression that there's a $1.4 million tax allocation, no, that's not correct. As you said, it was in 2019, $130,000. And I'm making the point that it goes somewhat beyond that because of the cost of space and so on. But I have to admit, I didn't know that you had, we had reduced the tax allocation from as high as $200,000. So credit given where credit is due. But my point was to the cost of provision of service without really talking about where the money is coming from, because all the money outside of grants from the province, all that money comes from within the community, one way or another, whether it's fees or from taxpayers. And that was the point I wanted to raise, but thanks for clarifying.
Thank you. I also wanted to just clarify something for Councillor Janot, that if we were to go forward with his motion to limit the way we allocate our registrations, that we probably would have to do some more work on that because of our current mission, vision, and mandate as a municipal center, that we are inclusive, affordable childcare for all. There's no restrictions on income, and that there is income subsidy available through the province if you're not aware of that. So just thought I would clarify that for you as well.
Councillor Wilson?
Well, just a couple things. I'm thankful that Councillor Butler now feels that childcare is essential service that we provide. I'm pretty positive that this was not the case in previous public meetings, and I don't think he believed that the municipality should be in the business of childcare. So honestly, I'm glad that he has come around. I appreciate that, and I think we should move forward with this. But my question to Mrs. Daniels was that, and I'm sure this information has been shared already, but the fees will remain at $1,000 per child.
For June, it'd be $25 a day, and then starting in July, it would be $11.34, unless we could get food service back, which we are trying to work at that. So then there would be another addition chalked on top of that, but the parents would be responsible for that, not municipality.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Butler?
Councillor Wilson, how dare you characterize my position? I'm sorry to speak directly. I have never stated that daycare was not an essential or important service for this community. Not once. And even for essential services, cost efficiency is of primary importance. I will speak for myself, and I will not ask to have other councillors characterize my position. And I have never been anything but a supporter of daycare. 2 years prior to this one, I stood up on the stage and I had a lot of fun doing it, helping the Parents Association raise money for daycare. I find that statement to be incomprehensible.
My apologies, Councillor Butler, but there was discussion about insurance and such, and there was suggestion that should the municipality be in the business of childcare, and I'm appreciative that you feel that it should be. Thank you.
All right. I wanted to, despite deferring earlier, I will make some comments, but I will invite Councillor McGrath to close debate afterwards. But this is an important topic, and more obvious so because of, as Councillor Butler indicated, the cavalcade of cars that went by my house and each of our houses honking in support of childcare. I am happy to recognize that I think this goes way beyond what daycare and childcare appears to be about. The very last proclamation issued by council was a proclamation to proclaim Jasper as a welcoming and inclusive community. And so I ask, how do we demonstrate that? How do we action that aspiration? Jasper can't simply be welcoming and inclusive of visitors. We must be at least equally welcoming and inclusive of residents. And just as we have a brand for the destination, we have a brand for the community, and it is a caring community. And of course, there's personal benefit derived from access to quality accredited daycare, but there's also a social and economic and a community benefit. And a week ago when we had this discussion, I invited commercial operators to comment on the importance of daycare to their businesses. And I was so gratified to see that some of them responded. Just in a general sense that yes, daycare is important to our economic vitality. And as we've seen from all of the letters, and I'm so thankful that we have them, in order to contribute to the local economy, many people require daycare. And in this community, there are few, if any, options whatsoever. And so beyond the economic contribution, I think that daycare helps welcome people into the community in the first place. It helps, I think, local business with retention and recruitment of staff. It allows people to stay in our community and then contribute in so many other ways that never get added into the equation of the benefit. But I think they're real. I think that it also really helps us with our goal to be inclusive. So beyond being a catalyst to allow people to be included in the local economy, I think that it really helps with inclusion in the sense that it allows us to begin tackling both gender and income inequality, which are just, they permeate our society. And we here have an opportunity to start including more people in our society. And I think daycare in that sense is as essential as it is just to let somebody get to work. So I am fully in support of the motion, but I appreciate the community engagement in the issue. I appreciate all the comments, and I accept that we have to be more efficient where we can in operations, but it's a critical service, an essential service. And I just want to close by referencing in particular the offer extended by Penny Bayfield and the members of the Wildflowers parent group. And though I thank them for that offer, I think there are better uses for that money. We will find a way to fund daycare and out of school care. And to Councillor Janot's point, if there are needy people in our community, better to direct those funds in that direction than to contribute to the cost. But I very much appreciate the sentiment that came with the offer. Councillor McGrath, I will let you close.
Thank you very much for those words, Mayor Ireland. I think it's a good opportunity in this meeting to read something that I put together last evening. That unity is the glue that will hold us together. We are a connected, compassionate community, and we have such deep love for our town. Let's put all of that love and passion together to bring actions that are kind, meaningful, progressive, equitable, efficient, and sustainable. There's so much to gain by our efforts being united. We all want the same things. We must lead with heart and kindness to one another and to our community as a whole. There is no us and them. We are all one.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Council, you ready for the question? I won't repeat it then. I'll just call the question. All in favor? Opposed? There's one opposed. That is carried. Sorry, Councillor Butler?
Mayor Ireland, sorry, my screen is frozen and I think I'd like to see that vote counted. I think it's pretty important. Can we just be sure?
Yes.
Yes. I could see no hand on my own device.
You could see none? All right, I will call the question again. I was surprised, and it may have been that a screen froze, and that would be most unfortunate. So I will call the question again and give everybody a fair chance to hold their hand up. So in favor of the motion. There we go. All right. Hands down. Councillor Butler, if you could put your hand down. And now I will ask again, just for
my hand is down.
Yes, it is.
The system isn't working.
Well, it is. It's just working slowly. So just sit tight. I understand that there are problems. Councillor Journeau, if you can put both your hands down. If there is, you can't even hear?
No.
I hear some wind chimes.
Is there anyone who can hear me who is opposed to the motion? Of course, I don't know who didn't hear me. I am going to say, unless any councillor can indicate to me that they have seen any other indication, that was a unanimous vote. Okay. Thank you. The challenges of Zoom. All right. We are now at, sorry, Councillor Journeau and Councillor Demota. Either one of you?
I had made a mention about making an amendment or a new motion. And before I do that, Ms. Daniel did provide some background, but I do have a question for her. I understand that there is funding or support available for low-income families. My question is, do we assist them with the preparation of the necessary documents to do that?
I don't specifically, but yes, Community Outreach Services does that with all of the people who want to apply for subsidy.
So if we do get those requests, they are supported, there are help, so that make sure that daycare is not turned away for those people.
Yes, exactly. All that
they'd be new
information
Canadians. They'd be new Canadians for the most part, and probably don't understand the complexity of our forms and stuff. So you can assure me that the public will, or the community will support them in that.
Yes, the community already does support them in that, and we go over it at intake as well. So if they have any questions, we pair them with an outreach worker right away.
So I will not provide any amendment or new motion to the subject. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. Councillor Demota, were you just trying to bring my attention to Councillor Journeau? Okay, thank you. All right, agenda item 11, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. We had 7 letters, I think, on various matters. With respect to the first one, 11.1, I have not responded to that letter writer. I'm not sure whether other councillors have. Is there a will? Perhaps an administration respond to that. I think it is a particularly regulatory answer that can be given to that suggestion, but I, without consent of council, I haven't done it myself, but we could direct administration to respond. Is there a thought? I see one head nodding. Councillor McGrath?
Okay, sorry, there was a delay with my unmuting. I'm wondering, Mayor Ireland, if you could provide maybe just a brief explanation to the public so that it's understood by all with the tools that we have available to us, and maybe also like what our advocacy message has been to the province recently is that we're seeking tools to be able to run our municipality more sustainably, and currently just the lack of tools that we have available to us in response to Mr. Barchokas's letter.
Yes, thank you. And our efforts have been directed entirely, as you indicate, in firstly getting recognition that we ought to be given special status as a destination community reliant on tourism. Us, Banff, and Canmore have worked at that for many years. Without that, we have the same opportunities as other municipalities in the province to raise revenue, and that's from user fees or property taxes. A specific hotel tax, we are not empowered to do that in any event. No community in this province is, although some make it look like they are, but they don't have that ability. So we need the recognition, we need the tools. Whether that would be the tax that we would choose would be dependent on a number of factors, but we simply do not have that ability at this time. Under the changes to the Municipal Government Act recently, we can have subclasses of property. So non-commercial, or pardon me, non-residential property could be subclassed, and I suppose you could have a subclass for commercial accommodations. But within the new strictures, it could not be different than the 5.1 to 1 tax rate split anyway. So it wouldn't change the higher tax rate for anybody. And if you wanted to differentiate, then you would have to lower everybody else's taxes, and we would have less revenue rather than more. So there is not an opportunity to take advantage of that yet. And we are continuing to work that issue and will continue to work it, and with, I think, growing support from our community members who are really, I think, beginning to understand just how strapped we are in our income and revenue abilities, particularly evident in these COVID times. So thank you, Mr. Barchiokas, for that letter, and thank you, Councillor McGrath, for inviting me to address it in that way. With respect, sorry, Councillor Demota.
No, I'm not ready. I was waiting for the next.
All right. Well, with respect to the other letters, do any councillors see a need to respond to any others? I thought that there was. The issue of washroom closures, I'm not sure about that. That is one that we might perhaps address. And Councillor McGrath?
Regarding the washroom closures in agenda item number 11.4, with Mr. Kuzminski writing into us, it was something that I brought up last week as you know, under the context of likely we have made mistakes. And I think that it's fairly evident that there's going to be many mistakes made, not only by us at the municipality of Jasper, but by communities everywhere. And even really high levels of government are having to go back to the drawing board and reconfigure plans. So definitely the topic of reopening the Connaught washrooms should be a priority of ours, being that accessibility is very important, and we are a welcoming and inclusive community. So I would like to see administration, you know, I think there's a little bit of, it's hard right now because we have a report that's being prepared by administration that has not yet come to us. We have had very little information on what the decisions we've made at this council table have actually resulted in, And I do have something else to bring up in new business in relation to this topic, but just that, yes, wheelchair access is so important in a public washroom, and we have to see this another way presented to us, and hopefully come together with administration and work with administration to see how the smartest decisions can be made for our community.
Thank you, Councillor Demota.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath, for addressing that. And I just wanted to let the rest of council know that I have reached out in an email so far to the CEO of our improvement district, which is just ID District 12, with much of what Councillor McGrath has said. And I also plan on, in our intergovernmental meeting today, to address our public washrooms with Parks Canada. And as I stated last week, it's because both the ID, the Improvement District, and Parks Canada saw the need for that in our community. And I feel that even though there is a component to our public washrooms for our locals to use, we're also addressing a public need for people that are passing through our community on the various highways, as well as addressing day visitors to Jasper, which includes coming through Jasper National Park. So I've reached out to ID, and I'm going to reach out to Parks Canada to see if there's there could be some common funding available. I was looking at a 1/3 from everybody. At least the request is there, and I want the community to know that we're continually trying to explore other avenues to help facilitate some of the services that are required in our community, not only for locals, but for the traveling public as well, because I don't feel that all the responsibility should be bestowed on our local taxpayers. So thank you, Councillor McGrath.
Are there other items under agenda item 11 to be addressed? If not, I thank all of those people whose letters made it onto the agenda. There were others as well that came in late. I presume they will show up on another agenda, but many letters and emails have been received in recent days, many of which were too late to get onto this week's agenda, but be assured that they have been seen by council. That takes us to agenda item 12. Other new business, Councillor McGrath and then Councillor Demota.
I'm sorry, Mayor Ireland. In regards to agenda item number 11.2, should we have a discussion, being that it's on the agenda, about Mrs. Bucock's letter?
Yes, thank you. I unintentionally went over that. Mr. Furcho, you are there. Can you address whether that proposal is workable?
Your worship, that facility, we still have the resources to open it in a standard format, not with any kind of enhanced cleaning or protocols, but just the basic custodial services and the ability for it to be open once those services are available to be open. So just if there is no requirement for anything additional to meet what's set out in the letter, we could do that. So I guess I'll kick that back to, we'll have a look at that through our ECC group that is sort of got the expertise on hand, and make sure that we're able to support them and meet that need. And if there's any extra expense, we can advise council.
All right, and can you have direct communication then with the Jasper Artists Guild in that regard?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you. All right, I will return again then to agenda item 12, other new business. Councillor Demota, you had something?
Yeah, only if other councillors don't have anything to address, because I didn't, the opportunity didn't present itself at the beginning of council, but I would like to request to move in camera for to deliberate an HR matter, particularly one that's arisen today. And I don't want to make more light of it. I think that other councillors know what I'm talking about, and I think that needs to be addressed. So whether we do it in other new business or let councillors go through their reports on committees, then I'm willing to wait. But I would like to, if it's with the will of council, to move into in camera at one point before adjournment.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Mr. Furcho, you wanted to get in, but Councillor McGrath, you had your hand up first. Same topic? No. So, Mr. Furcho.
Your worship, just mindful of the time. We have a meeting with Parks Canada at 1:30.
Oh, goodness, yes. Well, in any event, it's not on the agenda. There might be a need for a Human Resources Committee meeting, but that could be called independently and not as an in-camera session of a regular public meeting. And maybe everybody else is aware of what you're speaking, but I am not. So if something has arisen today, it's arisen without me being aware. But perhaps we can sort that out after we adjourn this meeting and know what we'll be doing after our meeting with Parks Canada.
I'm willing to wait for a later time. I thank you for recognizing.
Councillor McGrath?
I have some new business to bring up. It's in relation to the topic where I explained at agenda item 11.4 that we have yet to receive the report from administration to know the level of detail and the outcomes from the decisions that we have made to reduce expenditures for the community, and my desire to have meaningful conversations with administration and how we move through expense reductions, because I'm a member of the local food society and I only know about this situation from the local food society. I don't know about this situation as a councillor. So it has been brought to my attention as a member that there is no water turned on, which of course I understand with logic that when there's expense reductions, there will be an effect of some services not being available. However, the community garden members are, they're growing local food, and local food has been noted as a strategic priority of ours in our strat plan. And I believe it's very important to have meaningful discussions around the budget reductions because they affect people's well-being and they affect people's lives. And I, for one, as a decision maker for our town, want to see the impact. I want to know the detail, and I want to be able to make informed decisions as they arise. So I'm regretful that I didn't have this information earlier, and I would like to address the community garden members of the local food society and let them know that we're on it and we're going to have these conversations, and I hope that we can sort it out. And thanks for bringing it to my attention, because I'm disappointed that I didn't find out any other way.
Thank you for that. Is there any other new business? Councillor reports. Councillor Keller-Grampy.
I'd just like to report that Community Futures has now opened the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. It went live yesterday. So anybody that did not qualify for the original business loan of $40,000 to the government will now, were turned down for that, will qualify for this loan. There's a portal up on the Community Future website. It's a pretty easy application. You just have to apply. As the chair of Community Futures, I have been invited on Friday from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock with other mountain communities to talk with Assistant Deputy Minister Justin Reamer of Western Diversification and the effects of COVID on our communities. I've been invited with Ms. Robbins to attend this, and I will send out an email to council and we can get some feedback for our cuts, and I have all that so that I can report this. Also, one of the big topics is right now there's a lot of relief for businesses. There's the wage subsidy, there's a number of programs. However, come next year, that may dry up. And that is one of the conversations that we're having with Western Diversification, because they do provide a lot of loans to small businesses through the West. So if any councillor has any other topic they would like me to bring to that meeting, please send me an email.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Hempe. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you. Yesterday, I attended the trauma-informed care training with the Jasper Community Team Society all day. I finished my Monday by having a library meeting with our local library board. Tomorrow and last week, I have attended the community conversations for COVID-19, and I will be in attendance tomorrow. There's also a school council meeting tomorrow evening, which I have attended occasionally, and when I attend, they like me to give them updates as a counselor. So just letting council know that I will be there, and we'll put on a council hat and share information as it's available. As well as on Thursday evening, there is the AGM for the Jasper Community Team Society. It's noted in our upcoming events, and if anyone in the community is interested in serving on the board or learning more about the JCTS, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Any other reports? Seeing nothing, upcoming events, there is a list. We have a meeting in a short while, 20 minutes. The weekly conversation, community conversation, tomorrow, the AGM, as Councillor McGrath has indicated, and Community Futures, June 18th. If there is no other upcoming events of which council should be aware, I would invite a motion that we adjourn at 1:10 p.m. Councillor Keller-Hempe. All in favor? Got all the hands early this time. Thank you all. We are adjourned. Thank you to members of the public, all of whom showed up, 70 of which were here at the end. So very well done. Thank you all. Good afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.